Hey, Comics Cubers, last week, Paul and I started reading Alan Moore's famous unpublished proposal, Twilight of the Superheroes, and we only got halfway through it. So, over here, for this episode, we are going to go through the rest of Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes. Resuming our Twilight of the Superheroes. Retrospective? No, it's not a retrospective because it didn't happen.
DVD commentary.
DVD commentary. Okay.
Yeah.
Drunks, hookers, and panhandlers, including the heroes, John Constantine. You would think from this that John Constantine wasn't even a main character, like given how late he shows up in this pitch. Sandy's Place, the Phantom Lady, the Doll Man, Uncle Sam, Blackhawk, Plastic Man, Congorilla, Green Arrow, and Black Canary, the Question, the Batman, the Shadow, the Metal Men, Robot Man, Adam Strange, and other characters. Okay, so that's about it for the houses. Not all the superheroes, however, are actually members of clans. Those who aren't in clans are almost totally inactive, and for the most part inhabit one of the rundown barrio areas of either Gotham or Metropolis. Both cities transformed beyond anything we've seen previously by the passage of time and change. The way I see it, the scenes in the barrio will take up much of the book and will probably be some of the livelier ones. The barrio is a superhero slum where all the old heroes come to die. As I see it, almost every passerby, shopkeeper, and incidental background character there used to be some sort of super character or other 20 years ago. A lot of them are drunks, some of them are hookers or panhandlers. The majority eke whatever living they can out of dead-end jobs, while there are a few who have actually adapted to their changed circumstances quite successfully, and certain others who still actively carry on their own personal vendettas against injustice, albeit secretly. I'll list these various characters one at a time, mainly because I have fairly specific ideas about all of them that I'd like to get across so that you'll know who we're talking about before I get on to the actual plot. Most of the following have been altered almost beyond recognition, so this is fairly necessary. Does that sound familiar to you?
What do you mean?
Almost every background character is a former super character. That sounds like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen to me.
Yes.
And
yes.
Kingdom Come.
Yeah, I was just about to say Kingdom Come, actually. Yeah. I mean, do you think Wade read this? I know we were saying it in the last chapter, but that we didn't think Wade read it. But maybe he did. I don't know.
Maybe he did. I'm not sure. I feel like Wade could have come up with it.
Yeah.
On his own. I don't know if he read it.
Yeah. He must have been aware of its existence, I guess.
I kind of think that if Wade did read it and like spent a lot of time on it, he would have consciously tried not to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, we have no idea if he would have, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm by no means accusing him of ripping this off. As I mean, Kingdom Come is a completely different animal in so many ways. I'd be interested if any of this sparked off any little ideas in his head, though.
I do think it's very different.
Yeah,
definitely. I do think it's very different. It's only the same in the surface. One of the things that Wade will continue to say over and over again is that some ideas are really easy, like like evil Superman and just evil Superman. Like it's really easy. So I think that he wouldn't really. I'm not. This is not to disparage Alan, but I do think that there are some ideas here that are pretty pretty wouldn't it be cool if blank?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't
And
think they would do it. Yeah.
we have to remember as well, this is 80s Alan as well, you
Mm.
know? So a lot of these ideas that are cliche to us now just hadn't been explored at this point.
That's true.
Yeah.
There are certain ideas I don't need exploring though, like Captain Marvel and Mary Marvel.
Yeah, I think we're going to come across a few more as we read through this.
The other thing that I want to point out is that almost every single Earth X character is here.
Yes, I was thinking that. A lot of, what was it, Quality Comics, wasn't it? Earth X.
A lot of quality comics, and the interesting thing is that a lot of these characters are unpowered characters or low-key characters, but then all of a sudden you have Uncle Sam. Like, why is he here?
Yeah. I guess the freedom fighters connection is all I can think of, and I guess there's that sense of like, you know, like we were talking in the last section of this, that Alan Moore likes to say something about the real world, and you know, Uncle Sam, reflection of America. You know,
Well,
I guess it's yeah.
you know who definitely read this?
Who's that?
Jeff Johns.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You remember the first issue of Infinite Crisis?
Oh God. It's so unnecessary.
And what he did to Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Definitely read it.
Didn't they? Did they bring back? Oh no, I'm thinking. I just had a vague memory then of like Uncle Sam being brought back as some sort of mech character or some kind of armored guy, but I think that was much sooner than Infinite Crisis. That was around the time of Our Worlds at War. That was. Do you remember that? I can't remember what he was called.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. It was a very brief period that Uncle Sam came back as some sort of armored guy. Can't even remember what he was called. It didn't take.
Of course not. One of the big things, one of my small digressions, is one of my very first comics was The Secret Origin with Uncle Sam.
Oh, wow.
And
cool.
The Guardian. Somehow I knew of Uncle Sam and The Guardian very early on in my life.
Well, what more do you need? You got the two best ones right there.
What, DC's ultimate patriotic superhero and DC's ultimate superhero with a shield?
Oh, they must have picked. Oh, God. Yeah, that's why they put them together, wasn't it? Oh.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was quite clever.
What do you think? What else do you think of this collection of heroes? Of course, the most notable one is the Batman. There's a in front of Batman.
Yeah, the Batman. And the Shadow. Like, that's so weird. But I
Not
know,
at
like,
the time.
I guess, like, because there'd been a few Shadow series out. There may even have been one out around that time, I guess.
Yeah, Michael Kaluta was working on the Shadow at some point.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Howard Chaykin was working on one.
Yeah.
They got Bill Sienkiewicz to do the interiors for maybe 4 or 5 issues for the Shadow.
And there's earlier stuff, isn't there? Like, there was a Shadow, very short Shadow series in the 70s, I want to say.
Yeah,
and
I think that was
Shadow popped up in Batman, didn't he?
The Shadow did pop up in Batman, yes. Yes, he did.
Yeah. But
And
you never hear about that, do you?
No, you don't. They never show or reprint anything when they stop having the license. So I don't think we've ever seen it reprinted.
It's a shame.
The existence of the Shadow here ensures that even if this comic had gotten made, it would not have continued to see print.
Yeah. Oh, I like how like DC using unlicensed characters so they can't reprint it anymore. They've got the Shadow, and Marvel have got Rom Space Knight.
And yet, in the context of superhero fans, I feel like Rom Space Knight is more beloved.
I've never understood that.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
This is the freaking Shadow.
Yeah. Don't come at us, Rom Space Knight fans.
I don't don't get it at all.
John Constantine. Constantine is about 20 years older, but obviously hasn't changed a bit, except for the fact that he's living with a woman and has been for the past 15 years. This woman might even turn out to be the Fever character that I introduced in my two-part vigilante story a while back. Anyway, her and Constantine are to all intents and purposes married and are obviously loving it. Constantine is still into the same sort of scams and wheeler dealing, and in the whole story of Twilight, he seems to be the only character who has his finger upon all the pulses and knows exactly what's going on in this maze of plot and counterplot between the various factions involved. He thus becomes a central character in the story. And it strikes me that Constantine would probably be a logical choice to launch into his own title off the back of this crossover. It'll never happen. If you're looking for characters to do this with.
You feel like he just worked that in, but that was always his plan.
Yeah.
This whole thing is a pitch for a John Constantine book at some point, and he's just like, maybe we could do this.
Just, I do sometimes think, like, there's a parallel universe out there where DC didn't screw over Alan Moore over Watchmen. And, they've got like an Alan Moore, John Constantine series. They've got Alan Moore working on Superman some more. They've got Moore doing a crossover, another crossover further down the line,
Yeah.
It would have, and in the long term, surely they would have made more money than what they're making off Watchmen. And I'm sure they're making a lot of money off Watchmen. But that's one property, right?
That's one property. They would have they would have continued to make that money.
Yeah. Like they rather than just one film, they've had loads of films off loads of different properties, loads of different TV series spinning out. It just boggles my mind, And of course, it's too late now. I don't think there's anything they could do to ever win him over. He's in a completely different place now, isn't he? Creatively and in his life.
And in his life.
Yeah.
I wonder what that would have been like, because can you imagine very simple, like here's a very simple ripple effect. Can you imagine Alan Moore getting so many DC titles, being like the lead of so many of DC in so many ways? What does that do to Grant Morrison?
Yeah, would he have done more of his own stuff, like indie stuff? Would he have been more over at Marvel?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Would it have, like, I don't know. Yeah,
that's the thing. That's just one of the examples. For those who may not know, Grant Morrison and Alan Moore famously do not like each other. Okay.
One thing that just occurred to me, what would this crossover, if this crossover had been made, what DC crossover event would it have replaced?
Invasion.
Was it Invasion? Was it Millennium?
Did Millennium come before Invasion?
I think Millennium came before Invasion, yeah.
Okay, it's probably Millennium.
That's interesting.
Millennium is the one with the Manhunters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The one where Wally West's dad is revealed to be a Manhunter.
Yeah, and nothing much comes of it.
Yeah, that would be it.
That was a wacky crossover. If you don't mind us diverging just briefly, just to talk about how wacky Millennium was, in that, like, John Byrne tied into it by revealing a Manhunter plot involving everyone in Smallville that stretched all the way through Superman's childhood, and that Lana Lang had been involved with her entire life. Clark Kent's family doctor was a Manhunter agent, and wasn't everyone in Smallville brainwashed, or everyone over a certain age or something?
Yeah.
And they never mentioned it ever again.
I know.
It's crazy. That's wacky.
It has no effects whatsoever.
No.
Also, like, Superman ran into a booster gold manhunter.
Yeah.
One of the things that, I mean, we talk about how crossovers derail series. One of the things that annoy me is like when reading the George Perez Wonder Woman now, she's in the middle of fighting, doing a quest for the gods, like fighting god after god after god, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I have to go fight the manhunters.
Yeah.
And then she comes back and she's like, I am done fighting the manhunters.
And it turns out the god Pan has been replaced by a
A
manhunter.
manhunter.
How does that work?
That's so dumb. I'll tell you what crossover this does remind me of.
Yeah.
Armageddon 2001.
Do you know what? I really like Armageddon 2001. I know, they had to change it last minute and it suffers as a result, but I don't know. I just think it's a really fun premise.
It would have been better if Captain Atom was the bad guy.
Yeah, and what a silly reason for like changing it. So for people watching this, Armageddon 2001 was the 1991 crossover event, I believe.
There were two 1991 crossover events.
Were there? What was the other one?
War of the Gods.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And so it was all set to be revealed that Captain Atom was secretly this villain from the future, Monarch. And at some point in the future, 10 years from now, Captain Atom would go mad and turn evil and come back and kill a bunch of people or whatever. And but it leaked. And so for some reason, they changed it really last minute to the point where issue 2 of Armageddon 2001 literally starts off with old Captain Atom going mad. And then all of a sudden that plot stops or changes halfway through. And Hawk out of Hawk and Dove is just like, I am evil now.
And then they kill Dove.
And then they kill Dove.
Which, by the way, that's always... I know I read the JSA run where Dove was brought back, but I still don't understand how she was brought back.
No.
They just did it for some reason, somehow.
She just turns up in that cell, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's just in a cell somewhere, and she's just like, hi, I'm Dove, and I'm back.
I'm alive now. I got better.
I guess we're riding with that now.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of Armageddon 2001 because of the framing sequence. This is exactly what he was saying. It's like,
yeah.
If the writers and artists can be involved as much as they want to be. I mean, in this case, they all had to write a story, but it's all an alternate reality story, so they can actually go wild. And it was in an annual, so it didn't have to be the main person.
They should do that for every crossover,
Annuals?
Yeah, keep put them in annuals. It's like Night Terrors, the recent one. They've just had their own little Superman Night Terrors, Action Comics Night Terrors, Batman Night Terrors. And if you want to opt out of it, you can.
Yeah, it's not part of the line, right? It's not part of the actual series.
They should do that all the time.
I think they used to do that at Marvel.
Yeah. I think you're right, yeah.
Like the crossovers were in annuals. He also mentions the woman that John is living with, who might be the Fever character that she introduced in Vigilante, in that maybe controversial child abuse, incest storyline.
What is with 80s Alan Moore?
It's because these topics were not included were not explored back in the day.
He was the first, yeah. Or at least the first to do it well.
The first who was allowed, maybe other people are doing it. I don't think Fever has ever shown back up. I could be wrong about that. Feel free to let me know in the comments.
I don't know. I mean, for all I know, she turned up in Vigilante again, but that's not a series I'm overly familiar with. In fact, the Alan Moore issues are the only ones I've read out of that series. So,
Sandy's Place. Sandy's Place is one of the pivotal settings in our story. It's the main bar room in the barrio and thus acts as a meeting point for a lot of the characters involved. Its proprietress is Sandra Knight, formerly the Phantom Lady. I'll run through the main characters who hang out at her joint, starting with the lady herself. The Phantom Lady. Sandra Knight is now approaching 50, now somewhere approaching 50, and has a sort of ripe, down at heel, Joan Collins sexuality to her still. She runs the bar and acts as a sort of den mother to all the regulars who drift in there, maybe occasionally sleeping with one of them for old time's sake, although never anything lasting or serious. She's a nice woman, doing her best to get by in a difficult world, who nevertheless seems to have a lot of care and affection to lavish on others, as evidenced by her care of the next member of our cast, up for discussion. To your point, Paul, we finally get to a woman. It's probably the shortest paragraph for one of these.
And it's like we're not hearing about, well, I suppose we do hear about a few other people's sex life later on, but yeah, it stands out a bit considering this is one of the only women who gets, like Wonder Woman doesn't even get a paragraph, does she? I don't think. No. It's just like she's Superwoman now.
Wonder Woman and Donna Troy do not get anything.
Yeah.
I do think it's unfortunate. Have you ever read the original proposal for Watchmen before he made them the Watchmen characters? So the original proposal for the Charlton characters?
No.
It's in the Absolute Edition. I guess it's reprinted now in the new editions. He goes through it character by character. So talks about Captain Atom, talks about the Question, and so on. By the time he gets to the Nightshade, who becomes the Silk Spectre, he says something like, what does he say? He says something like, I don't know much about Nightshade, but I'm thinking perhaps this can be a way to explore sexuality in this world. Which I do think, by virtue of that person being the only woman in the cast, makes sense. But this is, for all of Alan Moore's greatness, this is, to quote a cliche, I mean, to say a cliche, this is how you know when a man is writing a woman.
Yeah.
Because it's the first thing that people highlight.
Yeah. But, Watchmen turned out better than that, I think, with its treatment of all the characters. Like,
I do agree with that, and I think a huge part of that is because Laurie and Sally, he ended up making them new characters. But I think if he had stuck to Nightshade, then maybe he wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
To develop them further. To be fair to Alan, though, was the Phantom Lady? Did the Phantom Lady have any other defining characteristics?
Well, this is it. Yeah. I mean, it's not as if there was this rich history that he was ignoring. She was a feminist icon, damn it. Yeah, that's a fair point.
The Phantom Lady was the original bad girl in the good girl era. So I don't think he's too off base with this one.
No. I think it stands out because there's so few women in this, but I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with that idea on its own, kind of thing.
I think maybe he could have developed it a little bit more, just as he does with everyone else here. Because we're gonna get to Dollman. It's not like Dollman has a rich history.
Yeah, he speaks about Dollman for bloody ages.
Speaking of Dollman.
Oh, here we go. The Dollman. Darrell Dane is probably the most unsettling and pitiful character in our cast, even though we don't see much of him. What has happened basically is that the constant shrinking and growing, plus the effects of the square cube law with regard to size increase, have taken their toll upon him. As the years passed, his bones became brittle and would break easily if he stayed at normal size for too long. Eventually, it became easier to stay at 6 inches tall all the time. But this itself was not the end of the problem. Remaining at a constant 6 inches, Dane's body and brain began to adapt to their new size, redistributing their mass and aging their neurons for greater comfort and effectiveness. As a result, Dane has slowly changed shape into a horrible, elongated insect man, still 6 inches high, whose bone structure is altered dramatically into something barely recognizable as anything that used to be human, although just recognizable enough to be disturbing. His brain has also had to change to accommodate drastically reduced brain size and capacity. He's still intelligent, but it's a non-human intelligence, and he can barely communicate coherently with normal humans anymore. Sandra Knight has taken him under her wing. She keeps him in a vivarium behind the bar. It brings in enough money to pay for his food, and he's too alien to mind being displayed like this, so what the hell, although she still feels bad about it. And Sandy is almost the only person that the former doll man can talk to and make himself understood. She's also the only person unselfish enough to be able to bear the creepy little bastard running up her arm to nestle on her shoulder and talk into her ear in his eerie, piping, almost inaudible voice. Daryl Dane, while he's the only person other than Sandy who lives at the bar full-time in his tank, is not the only lame duck that Sandy extends her sympathy to.
Okay, to be fair, he does talk about Dollman for ages, but he doesn't actually talk about Dollman.
Yeah, that's true.
He does talk about Sandra Knight, so maybe like we will get to Sandra Knight over and over again as this goes on.
To be fair, Sandra's like a presence in all of these, isn't she? So yeah, that's a fair point as well. But wow, I mean, this is a real thing, isn't it? Like that became more and more prevalent, I think, is in that taking superpowers to their horrifying and logical conclusion.
Is this the logical conclusion?
Well, maybe not logical, but you know, this sort of pseudo cod science going on here, you know, square cube law and all that, you know.
Yeah, okay. I get that. I do think he took it to a conclusion, and it started off logically. I'm not sure he needed to become an insect man. We did talk about how, yeah, like I said, there's nothing here about Dollman. Like actual Dollman, there's nothing here about Dollman. This is him looking at the power set and thinking of the worst possible thing to do with it. He's not really a character in this book.
No, I mean, like, considering like what he's done with his character, it could be the Atom gets stuck at 6 inches and this happens to him. You know, it doesn't need to be Dollman. Like,
it could be anyone who shrinks. That's true.
Yeah.
Dollman, for those not in the know, is Quality Comics' shrinking superhero. Although, unlike the Atom, I believe he can only shrink to like a certain size. No, like the Atom
I think
can go
6 inches is his limit. Yeah,
he can only go down to 6 inches. At a certain point, I thought he was stuck at 6 inches all the time. But
well, look what happens when he is.
And unlike the Atom, the Dollman does not have a cool costume.
Isn't he something in his... What is he in his secret identity? I always get him mixed up with Black Condor. One of them's like a senator or something, aren't they?
I don't know. I feel like much like many of the 40s characters, I dismissed them all as like rich playboys.
Yeah. They all kind of boil down to that.
They're all the same.
I was just thinking though, Quality Comics characters. One person I'm surprised hasn't popped up in this one Quality Comics character is Madame Fatal. the world's
Ah,
first cross-dressing superhero, and
yes.
and you'd think that would have fitted into what Alan's doing here quite well. Not that I'm making any judgment on anyone's lifestyle, but you can imagine through this sort of 80s lens that Alan is looking through here, you can imagine something being done with that kind of character.
Alan would have had a field day with it, I believe. I just looked up Dollman, and I have no idea what his occupation is. It doesn't say.
All right. So not even his Wikipedia is going into that much detail about it.
Uncle Sam is the character I'm most looking forward to writing. No, it's not Alan, it's John. Taking my cue both from the character of Uncle Sam in Robert Coover's excellent book about the Rosenberg execution, The Public Burning, and from the portrayal of Richard Nixon on Robert Altman's Secret Honor. In Coover's book, there is a sort of giant called Uncle Sam, who is exactly like the old quality character, right down to his dialogue, which is a sort of breathless rush of manic cornball philosophy and darkly lyric jingoism. He talks endlessly about his exploits, boasting Paul Bunyan fashion about how he strode across the sea, up to his red and white striped thighs in the deepest waters of the Pacific, and rooted out his archenemy, the Phantom, wherever he should strike. In the Altman film, there is a harrowing portrait of Richard Nixon putting himself through a solitary self-confessional, sitting in a lonely room and vomiting his history into a tape recorder, helplessly spilling out all of the things that he'll never be able to tell another living soul for fear of his life. All the stuff about Watergate that nobody ever suspected, all the stuff about Kissinger and the Shah, all the places where the bodies are buried. As I see my Uncle Sam, he's a hopeless derelict with no power at all, and nobody is even entirely sure whether he actually is the Uncle Sam or some wino dressed up like him. He sprawls in a dark corner of the bar, drinking the last years of his life away, and babbling to himself in a mixture of the two styles outlined above. His cornball jingoistic reminiscences occasionally leading his erratic memory up alleyways in the American past, down which he'd rather not stray, since his ramblings will have a kind of dark poetry to them. I see him acting as a sort of surreal Greek chorus or something, his senile monologues having suggestive resonance within the main framework of the story. He is one of the other social cripples that Sandy can always find a free drink for, even though he is not an actual physical cripple yet, despite the fact that his liver is obviously deteriorating rapidly. The only actual physical cripple to regularly visit Sandy's place is our next character for discussion. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there.
So you know
Again,
how we've been
that's
talking about whether Wade has read this book, this proposal?
yeah,
We're not sure, right?
right.
You know who I believe has definitely read the proposal?
Alex Ross.
The other guy who worked on Kingdom Come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's his Uncle Sam,
Yeah, yeah.
which he published for Vertigo after Kingdom Come. That's his Uncle Sam.
Do you think that do you honestly think this is where he got it from? Or again, is it like a sort of is it an obvious idea, a sort of disillusioned, ignored kind of vision of America? Oh, the spirit of America is what's happened to it, you know?
It might be an, I mean, obviously Moore got it from somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you take into account the age differences between Ross and Moore, because Ross was a teenager when this proposal was made. So sorry,
Right.
the age difference between Ross and Wade.
Mm,
Now Wade would have been working in DC and would have definitely run across the proposal,
yeah,
but I think a teenage Alex Ross would have definitely had it in his brain.
you're right. When was this known about, this proposal? Like pre-internet, did people know about it?
Maybe it was being distributed across the Usenet stuff
Right.
that would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
my guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those who haven't read it, Alex Ross and Steve Darnold's Uncle Sam is actually really good.
Cool. I've never read it.
It's really good. It's really good. Very underrated.
Cool. I just looked up as well that armored version of Uncle Sam that briefly existed. He was called the Patriot, apparently. Yeah.
That's great. One time I got a long comment on my website arguing with me that I called Jeff Mace the Patriot obscure, saying that there's no way he's an obscure character. That yes, Jeff Mace of the Liberty Legion is not an obscure character. Okay.
Bit of a digression, right? I got told off on the internet once because I referred to Captain Marvel Jr. as the sidekick. And,
Okay.
And you know, I take his point because he carried his own issue and his own series, and he was very distinct from Captain Marvel in the style of stories they were doing with him. But he's called Captain Marvel Jr., right?
He's literally called Junior. I don't know what to say.
But anyway, that's just me settling old scores.
Oh my goodness. All right. I think the thing about that Uncle Sam is we've definitely seen it afterwards.
Yeah, but not there.
But
yeah.
not in the context of the DC universe.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm wondering if Jeff Johns and Alex Ross have ever worked together. They have, right?
Yes, they have. Yeah. The first one that springs to mind is on his Jeff Johns' less good Justice Society series. The one that when they did a Kingdom Come sequel together.
Yeah, nobody talks about that either.
Yeah.
You'd think that would get talked about more, but no. Okay.
No. So, Blackhawk. This is the character all the kids are into, right?
Yes. One of the biggest characters. One of the biggest icons. Blackhawk. Hawkeye!
Coming to a cinema near you. For a few issues, it might not even be apparent that Blackhawk is a cripple. I feel I should do a disclaimer here. I mean, that's not a description I would be comfortable giving myself
at this point.
Yeah. So I just want to. I'm reading out words written in 1987 that probably weren't meant for public distribution, and that's my disclaimer.
In 1987, definitely, it was not politically incorrect to be saying such things.
Yeah. So a little disclaimer there. This is because he has a perfect pair of prosthetic legs to replace his own legs, which, Douglas Bader style, are now missing. He is a sinister and obsessive figure, still fighting a private war inside his head, which has never quite been the same since the mission in which all his teammates died, in which he lost his legs. He lives in a single room in the barrio, paid for out of the remains of the fortune that once funded Blackhawk Island. I figure at some point in the Second World War, he got his hands on some Nazi gold and still has a reserve of it somewhere, albeit a dwindling one. Gold is, more than ever, a firm economic unit in the chaotic economic fluctuation of this future world. I couldn't predict Bitcoin, could he?
No, he couldn't. No.
So he could probably afford to live a less Spartan existence. He just doesn't want to. Rising at 5 every morning and strapping on his legs before working out in the gym and the flight simulator that he keeps at a secret location downtown. In the evenings, he maybe calls in at Sandy's for a glass of Perrier, before going on to cruise around the barrio's leather bars. At the bars, he singles out young men according to some system known only to him and offers them employment in some unspecified endeavor. We eventually find out that he is recruiting a new squadron of Blackhawks to replace his dead friends, and that he has 7 F-3 bombers hidden in a massive underground hangar that he has invested the remains of his gold into. He picks up boys and asks their names. Maybe one of them says, "My name's Charles." Blackhawk pats him on the shoulder and smiles and says, "I think I call you Chuck." A boy called Andrew becomes Andre, and so on. Blackhawk is a sort of obsessive urban fascist with a survivalist mentality and a strong sociopathic streak. He is obviously building up his squadron of vicious Leather Queen Blackhawks and equipping them to act out some terrible version of his own internal Holocaust. You can take the boy out of the war, but you sometimes can't take the war out of the boy. And Blackhawk's new squadron will almost certainly figure prominently in the explosive climax to this series.
Yeah, that really makes me want to get into more Blackhawk.
Yeah. Well, he can't fail to get his own spin-off out of this.
You know what though? In top 10, in top 10, the prequel to top 10, which is called the 49ers, which is set in 1949 when that city was established and stuff, there is a Blackhawk type character, and he is kind of a fascist sociopathic person.
Right, that's interesting.
And it did figure in heavily into the climax to that particular story. So he held on to this for a while.
That's interesting.
As far as I remember, he did not have prosthetic legs.
That's the unfortunate thing here, isn't it? Is that, again, this is like a time when there's 0 gay characters. I beg your pardon. There's one gay superhero, isn't there, who will come in Millennium. What's his name? Strango? I can't
remember. There is one prominently gay superhero in Marvel.
Oh, there's North Star.
North Star was there.
Yeah. But it occurred to me while I was reading this that, we're looking, one sort of context we're not kind of considering here maybe is, Alan Moore's come out of British comics with this sort of, like most famously with comics like 2000 AD, this sort of really on the nose satire.
Yeah.
Is kind of a big feature in British comics. So I guess he's coming from that context as well, which is something we should probably say. So is this the kind of thing that would have been given the green light, do you think, in DC at that time, 1987?
They greenlit an incest story with Fever and Vigilante, so
that's true. Yeah, yeah. No, what am I saying? Of course they would have.
but I can understand the fact that maybe not a lot of people are probably reading Vigilante.
Yeah.
And that there would be people reading this.
Well, I guess shortly after this, they greenlit The Killing Joke, though, didn't they? So
maybe Alan just had like a free pass.
Yeah.
Okay, the in top 10, the Blackhawk character is called Sky Shark. So
right. Okay.
Very, 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 very close. So it's weird he held on to this particular part of this story. Maybe he just really likes Blackhawk.
Well, I think he's like he's of that age where he would have been getting these sort of DC comics where like Blackhawk was a big thing. Like I was gifted a bunch of comics from my friend Harry. He gifted me a load of his comics from his childhood from the 60s, because he used to collect loads of DC and very generously gave them to me. And there's a lot of Blackhawk in there.
Maybe he was big.
Yeah, no, I think, maybe like Blackhawk was you know, although there was that period, wasn't there, in the 60s where people stopped buying Blackhawks, so they changed them all into superheroes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, you know who one of the creators of Blackhawk was?
Who's that?
Will Eisner.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Because Blackhawk's really old, isn't he?
Really old.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eisner
Huh.
was doing work for Quality at the time.
Again, this quality connection. Like, it was Blackhawk quality character.
Yeah, Blackhawk was a quality character. And
Wow.
so is our next guy, actually.
Most famous quality character.
The only famous quality character. Plastic Man. Like most of the old quality characters, Plastic Man often calls by at Sandy's before moving on uptown to look for trade. Plastic Man is a male prostitute. Or gigolo, or whatever the polite term might be.
Yeah.
Again, it was 1987. We're only reading this out loud. Thanks to his elastic consistency, he can keep himself looking young and attractive for a lot longer than many of his fellows, and it is this facet of his talent that he now exploits for a living. He is employed by the Seductive Winks escort agency, managed by one W. Winks. He is in fact the only employee of the agency. He is likable and kind despite his shady occupation, and everyone gets on with him, with traces of his past as Eel O'Brien finally starting to show through. He is a sort of active and romantic neighborhood hoodlum who always dresses well and buys flowers for old ladies and drinks for bums and apples for kids. There is a more somber side to him that he probably only reveals to old friends like Sandy, who is the only person that he'll sleep with for nothing these days. Although he seems permanently youthful, he has started to notice a lessening of the elasticity in the skin around his lower back. It's become saggy and feels like crepe, like something that has been stretched once or twice too often and is becoming shapeless. Plastic Man has a sort of horrible half-formed vision in his head that he doesn't like to think about, concerning how he might finally end up. He might end up as just a puddle. He often wakes up screaming in the dead of the night from dreams about this, and the shades that he habitually wears now are there to hide the tired and worried look around his eyes, as much as anything else. Woozy Winks is a roguishly half-likable but mostly disgusting old pimp, who will get a phone call from Kathy Kane. Yeah, I know the Earth 1 Batwoman died, but the one on Earth 2 didn't, and has presumably been living in anonymous retirement on Earth Composite ever since the crisis. And notify Plas, who will go around to her mansion to keep Miss Kane company for the evening, giving Woozy a cut of the subsequent monies. I see Plastic Man as being a sort of reluctant hero who'll come through in the end.
I mean, is anyone asking for Woozy Winks, the pimp? Like,
It reminds me of that one Heroes Reborn moment. I don't know if you remember this, when the Fantastic Four are reading the newspaper, and Johnny says, "Hey, Reed, this says you now make X-rated movies." And Sue just goes, "Well, I guess they'll know why they call you Mr. Fantastic."
so unnecessary.
I wonder if it was necessary though for like the late 80s, because I feel like a lot of Vertigo stuff, for example, does feel like they're trying to push the envelope for the sake of pushing the envelope. You know, not that a particular Vertigo series is trying to do that, but like there are moments in the early Vertigo series where I feel like they're doing that. Oh, let's just put this joke in there, see what we can get away with, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, do we get to a point where we're, so for example, we were here, right?
Yeah.
Where if we wanted to get here, maybe it was necessary to aim for here.
Yeah. It's like, though, that Alan Moore can do this kind of stuff. He's got this, even, he's got the ability and the judgment, I think, to pitch this kind of stuff right and do it in the correct context. But you know how, like, he always says about Watchmen, it was a bad mood that he had in the 80s, and now it's just kind of been taken and made the template for comics. This one bad mood he had. And it's a bit like that with this. This is like this sort of. He was obviously on a big Frank Miller thing when he wrote this, right? He was really influenced by Dark Knight Returns. So Alan Moore gets really excited about Frank Miller and pitches this sort of Miller-inspired dark satire on the DC universe. And it's not even published, and it's just the template for so much that goes on in the DC universe,
Do you remember in 2020, DC said they would publish this proposal?
Yeah, did they ever do that?
I don't think they did, but can you imagine like a whole book where it's just a proposal? That's how much money they want to get out of Alan.
And I think it's a valuable context to look at this in. It's that Alan Moore writing this, right? He's more interested in setting out the logistics of a crossover as the sort of legacy of this project. He's not interested in this being the tone of the DC universe going forward.
Yes. He says so.
Yeah. But like all his, Killing Joke, I guess, was the one that actually got published and ended up setting the tone for everything, as well as Watchmen.
Yeah. For everyone interested, The Killing Joke is in fact talked about a lot in this book, The Man Who Laughs.
Yes.
Which is a collection of essays exploring the Joker, the Clown Prince of Crime. Paul and I each have essays in it, and so does our friend Lamar. Anyway, that was not at all a shameless plug.
You know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, an example of this sort of like the wrong lessons from Alan Moore's work and projects like this. I read Kevin Smith's Green Arrow Quiver again recently.
Yes.
And I do really enjoy that story. I think Phil Hester's art is fantastic in it, and I think Smith's got Ollie's voice spot on, but Kevin Smith, he takes Stanley and his monster and does something horrific with it, and it's like what Alan's doing to the characters in this pitch, but there's no point to it. There's no satire. There's no larger point about the world. There's no larger point about comic characters. It's just, wouldn't it be cool if like Stanley and his monster was like molested and tortured by his grandfather?
That's exactly it. Like,
yeah.
Alan, for the most part, is making a point. It may be a grumpy point.
Yes.
But it's a point. Have you ever read his short story In Pictopia?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
It's Plastic Man. It's Plastic Man. So for those who haven't read it, In Pictopia is a short story he did in the 40s, in the 80s, where every character is a character from the 40s or older. And the main character is somebody who's a stand-in for either Zatara or Mandrake the Magician. I'm going to say Mandrake the Magician, whose best friend is a stand-in for Plastic Man, who, while he is not a male gigolo, is in fact somebody who is going through a very difficult time in the grim and gritty 80s. The other thing that I want to point out before we move on from this is that I guess Alan likes Kathy Kane.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't need to be Kathy Kane at all. Kathy Kane was out of the books. She wasn't even in Crisis.
It's interesting though how the rules of Crisis and the post-Crisis DC universe hadn't been set in stone yet. So, like,
That's
you know,
true.
other subsequent writers, if they want to use Kathy Kane after Crisis, they're like, oh, this is a new post-Crisis Kathy Kane, you know? But Alan's like, oh, well, this is the Earth 2 one who's survived, and you know? So it's, yeah, we're unsure of the rules at this point, and what rules are going to be enforced and what ones aren't. So, yeah. And I guess that's what he's trying to do with this project, is set these rules in stone somewhat, to a
Yes.
certain extent. Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, we talk about how we don't need to see these characters like this, period, whatever. The reason that this may not be, you know, off, you know, completely off base, the reason it might work is because at the end of the day, this is a John Constantine story.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I really wanted to make that point about how, you know, Alan has got a larger point when he does this stuff, and it's not just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And you know, because I know we've been quite harsh, or we've been laughing at some of the less well dated elements of this pitch, but you know, it's Alan Moore. He's making a point with this. It's a satire, and you know, this is a pitch as well that was done in 1987, and I think that's important to remember as well, before anyone else had done anything like this.
It is also important to remember, for everyone who thinks we're making too much fun of this, we make fun of everything.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Like, watch our other videos. We laugh at everything and everything we like.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things I like, Congorilla, very fond of this character.
Go on.
Another character that I'm looking forward to doing, and one of the nastiest characters in our assembled cast. Basically, what has happened to Bill is that he got old. His human body got older and older, while at the rub of a ring, he could transmit his body to that of a powerful and immortal sacred golden gorilla. Ask yourself, what would you do?
I mean, fair.
Anyway. Like, I don't know, man. That's a really negative view of old age, isn't it? Would you rather be old or a gorilla? You know?
Immortal and sacred.
Yeah. Anyway, Bill eventually decided to stay in the body of a gorilla forever, and now is quite a wealthy and successful local businessman, a golden gorilla wearing a business suit, and even managing to talk just about recognizably, even if some of it has to be done in sign language. The sort of operation he runs is a sort of lucrative small-time criminal organization that services the bars and the gambling dens and the brothels, and also supplies most of the barrio's drug traffic. His activities will bring him into contact with lots of other characters, putting protection pressure on Sandy's bar, for example, or having Woozy Winks beaten up. Woozy Winks for non-union pimping. Do you know what? Just to digress for a sec, this is what I think we're missing as well, right? Is Alan Moore is funny, and that is a funny sentence. Woozy Winks being beaten up for non-union pimping. Like, you know, he's having a laugh with this as well. Like, you know,
yes, he is.
These ridiculous ideas, you know. And assuming that the barrio is set in the remains of Gotham, which I'm starting to favor more and more.
He's making this up as he goes along.
Then effectively he becomes the new guerrilla boss of Gotham City. He has a dark secret in his closet, however, almost literally. The body of Congo Bill, now over 90 years old, refuses to die. The gorilla mind that has been trapped in it unfairly refuses to let go, and is hanging on with a fierce and horrible willpower. Unable to bring himself to kill it outright, Congorilla keeps the shackled and naked old man in special rooms at his apartment, feeds it garbage, and hopes it will die soon. But it doesn't. It just lies in the corner and snarls weakly when he enters and fixes him with its ancient, glaring eyes as he gives it its food.
I love it. I love it. Do you know what the biggest influence on Watchmen was? And one of Alan Moore's favorite comics is growing up.
What's that?
And I think a lot of people's favorite comics growing up. Tales Calculated to Drive You Mad.
What's that?
It's the original Mad magazine.
Ah, right.
Harvey Kurtzman and all of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the main influence of Watchmen if you take a look at it, especially the Superman and Captain Marvel one, Super Duper Man by Wally Wood, because that's the one where they're like, Mad is the first one where like you put in a lot of background details into every single panel. And what they said with Watchmen was, let's do that, except we won't make it funny.
Yeah.
And when you read a sentence like having Woozy Winks beaten up for non-union pimping, that's when I remember like, oh yeah, Alan was a Mad reader.
Yeah.
Because Mad, the original Mad, was the first thing to super lampoon all of this stuff. Right? They had that Superman lampoon. They had something called Sherlock Sholmes, which is just lampooning Sherlock Holmes. They had if legend is true. Okay, so they had a story called Starchy, which is about Archie. It's an Archie lampoon where instead of being innocent or whatever, it's got Mr. Weatherby like lusting after the Betty and Veronica. It's got Archie being like, I don't know how to decide between Betty and Veronica, even though they look exactly the same. It's Jughead starts some racket in school where he's selling drugs, or if I remember right, or whatever it was. And if legend is true, that got Archie Comics so pissed at EC Comics that they're the ones who told on them to the US Senate.
They named names.
They named names.
Wow.
But that's, you read this paragraph and I'm like, all right, Alan was a Mad reader.
Yeah. And that's what we've been missing, I think, reading this, is that we've been taking it quite seriously, I think, going through it, even though we have been laughing at it. But we've been taking it, as read. We've been looking at it quite surface level. But it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be a joke, I think, a lot of this.
So we've been laughing at it, not thinking that we were meant to laugh at it, but we were maybe meant to laugh at it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
In other words, everyone, turns out Alan Moore is a really good writer.
Yeah. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing. Now, if anyone left us any hate comments from before this point in time, well, you now have to take all that back.
Yeah. I mean, we've been reading this out for hours now. I mean, our opinion is going to change halfway through, and before we end it, we're going to have several different opinions before this is over, I think.
Yeah, because there will be parts that we like and parts that we don't like.
Yeah.
I still don't need to see Captain Marvel and Mary Marvel doing it.
No, that's still, too much.
What do you think of what he did to Congorilla? You're the Congorilla fan.
Yeah, well, that actually kind of happened, didn't it? I mean, like, Congorilla's not like a crime boss, but he did eventually, in the actual comics, choose to stay in Congorilla's body, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And there was like the gorilla was knocking around in Congo Bill's body for a while.
He becomes a member of the Justice League, doesn't he?
Eventually, yeah. James Robinson starts using him in Justice League and the controversial Cry for Justice miniseries.
The Justice League comic no one wants to talk about.
Yes. But Yeah, there's some really good Congorilla stuff from just after this pitch. Like there was a Swamp Thing annual that just had all the gorilla characters from the DC universe at the time, just sort of doing things together. And Congorilla's quite prominent in that. There's a wonderful Brian Bolland cover of featuring Congorilla. And then there's a mini series that came out off the back of that. I can't remember who did it, but it's really good. I recommend it. I think that's got a couple of Brian Bolland covers as well.
All right. Well, here are a couple more famous people. We should point out that before you read Congorilla, he says that those are the Plastic Man and the ones before him are the main characters who hang out at Sandy's, although most of the other characters pass through from time to time. And it is fascinating that this includes the next set of people. Green Arrow and the Black Canary. Oliver and Dinah have both retired from costume crime fighting and are now co-editors of a small but vital and thriving radical newspaper that serves the barrio and will be useful in getting over background information quickly and stylishly. Oliver and Dinah are two of the nicest and most normal people in the series. Both fiercely committed and tireless in their efforts, both loving each other very much despite the violent rows that they have learned to weather and almost come to enjoy as part of the relationship. Their paper is called Black Feathers, and on its masthead there is a symbol of a drawn-back arrow about to be fired, fletched with black flight feathers. There's nothing in here about Oliver and Dinah.
No.
Dude,
although
good.
It's got a bit of a flavor of the Mike Grell series that would come later, I think. And I'm not saying Mike Grell was inspired by this, but that sort of idea of them having this sort of tumultuous relationship, but yet still being really firm with each other, being a really firm couple, despite their many arguments. I think that brings to mind the Mike Grell run quite a lot, I think.
I do think the Mike Grell run was the logical late 80s way to take Green Arrow in the first place.
Yeah.
I doubt that he and Alan are the only ones who pitched it that way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm a little, you would know this better than me, but Dinah does not necessarily have Oliver's political views, does she?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while since I read the Grell run, but it's weird. Yeah, she's not commonly associated with that, is she? But his views are quite. I always find like the way people talk about Green Arrow's views quite interesting anyway, because he's known as like the socialist superhero, right? But he's not. He's quite libertarian, isn't he?
A little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if he is a lefty, then he's a sort of Mark Miller kind of libertarian left nutball,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't. So to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know if that's been explored. If it has, nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen Black Canary express an opinion one way or the other.
She's expressed that she's mad at Oliver.
The question.
The question is a freelance investigator, a sort of masked Philip Marlowe, who doesn't make very much money and who usually ends up taking cases just for the interest or the moral necessity. He's quite good friends with Oliver and Dinah, and often gives them the inside dope on situations that he has knowledge of for reporting in Black Feathers. Him and Oliver have strong political differences, but are firm friends despite this. When our story opens, the question is investigating an impossible locked room murder mystery involving a midget and a 6'6" tall call girl into heavy bondage. Don't worry, I'll explain later. It's all vitally relevant.
Once again, we have to emphasize that we're only reading this out loud.
Yeah. So the interesting thing there is, again, I don't think Ollie and the Question are actually a million miles away from each other in their politics. Um, I think there's a lot of sort of like individual responsibility with Ollie,
Yeah.
And he's not like he's not someone who like wants the state to pick up the slack, is he? Like, he's all about like what individuals can do for themselves.
Yes. So the Question is definitely, of course, the Question is the inspiration for Rorschach and Watchmen, who
Yeah,
is 100% like all about individual responsibility.
yeah.
Um, so the Question is not quite as far as that. This is before the Denny O'Neil Question, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, so this is Steve Ditko's Question.
Yeah.
The
Who's very right wing.
who's very right wing, the Ayn Randian
Yeah.
Question. I yeah. Okay.
But I think it says a lot about, how Ollie's he's the socialist superhero. I think it says a lot about how Americans have viewed socialism over the years. Maybe not so much now, but certainly over the past few decades. Like, it's like anyone with a slightest whiff of leftiness about them, it's like a socialist, you're radical. and yeah, Ollie's not that right or not that left wing, I don't think.
I don't think so. No.
No.
Being left wing would mean that he exactly what wants the government to get the
Yeah.
slack.
Yeah. But he's anyone representing the government, he calls them a fascist, doesn't he? Like so.
That's exactly what it is. I think Justice League Unlimited Ollie was more left wing because he does have a line that says the government should provide for those who can't provide for themselves.
Yeah.
In that cartoon, but not in the comics.
And if you think about it as well, Green Arrow is based on Robin Hood, right? And Robin Hood stole from the rich to feed the poor because the poor were getting taxed so much. He was against taxes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, these next two go together. The Batman. Nobody's actually seen him for years. He's rumored to be around, he's rumored to be active, and rumored to be doing something, but nobody knows what or even really if. He might have died years ago. The Shadow. See, the Batman. In actual fact, these two crime fighters have joined forces in a clandestine bid to rid the Earth of the oppressive and dominating superhero houses forever, so that mankind can get on with its own destiny. We won't learn this until later in the series, although they play a big part in the ending. As an aside, are Tarzan and Doc Savage in the public domain yet? No big deal, but I'd really like a sort of secret council of the immortals. Batman, the Shadow, Doc Savage, and Tarzan. All planning to start the revolution that will rid Earth of the super people forever. Being basically more elemental forces than people, these characters have remained exactly the same, except they got tougher. Wow, 80s Alan really hates superheroes. Well, not hate superheroes, because he clearly loves superheroes, or he wouldn't be writing this. But like he hates the idea of like idolizing superheroes.
It's interesting that he sees Batman on the same level as these legendary pulp heroes. I wonder if that's a hint at how he sees Batman as a character, or how he saw Batman as a character at the time.
I think it definitely is. I mean, remember he just finished reading Dark Knight Returns.
Of course, yeah. Batman by the end of that story is an elemental force, isn't he? When he's on the back of that horse.
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, the whole story is him going from being a knackered man to this elemental force that age can't touch.
And he gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the story goes on, like literally bigger. with
Yeah.
no explanation. Because you're not supposed to take it literally, is the reason.
Yeah.
Of course, in the year 2023, Batman is bigger than all of these guys. And I think in 1987, he was probably bigger than all these guys. But definitely in 1989, he was already bigger than all of these guys.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because people talk about like public domain as if all of a sudden all these interesting creators are going to take these characters and do lots of wonderful things with them. But really, when a character falls into public domain, there's no one with any money behind them pushing them. So you stop hearing about them. Like Popeye. Popeye was everywhere when I was a kid.
Yeah.
There was like Popeye cartoons on all the time. There was a ridiculous Popeye spin-off where he had a kid who looked nothing like him.
I always thought Sweepy was adopted.
Yeah, Sweepy is, but this was Popeye.
Oh, really?
And Son.
There's another. Okay.
Have you not seen Popeye and Son?
No, I haven't seen Popeye and Son. I assume that was Sweepy.
It's he's got a kid with Olive who is like quite good looking for a cartoon and blonde and looks nothing like Popeye.
Quite good looking for a Popeye character.
But he's got these massive forearms. That's his only resemblance to Popeye. It's got this wonderful Beach Boys inspired theme tune. You've got to look it up on YouTube.
I gotta look it up. Popeye and Son. Okay.
Yeah. But my point is, he was everywhere. But now, like, he's public domain now, or at least he is in some countries, as far as I know. And you just never hear about Popeye anymore.
No, you don't.
And yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen eventually in the far, far future, when Superman and Batman fall into public domain. That's when they'll die, not die, but just people really stop caring about them.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to make any money off them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Everyone talks about like public domain like being this great thing, which, you know, it probably is. But
yeah,
I don't see anything done with public domain characters. I mean, I guess there's this new Winnie the Pooh horror movie, but I'm not really sure I even need to see that one.
Oh yeah, and like what Superman falls into public domain. Finally, we could see movies about evil Superman.
Yes.
One more thing I want to say about the Shadow is that this talk about like Batman, the Shadow, Doc Savage, Tarzan, all on this council together, made me think of Planetary.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because that's kind of what he does in that. And again, I'm not saying Warren Ellis ripped this off or anything, but like it's interesting how these ideas eventually crop up somewhere else, you know?
I know he definitely read this at some point, but I don't know if it was before or after he was writing Planetary.
Yeah. But again, I guess it's kind of like not an obvious idea, but an appealing idea that eventually someone's going to come across. If not Alan Moore, someone else, you know. Yeah. So, more favorites of mine. The Metal Men. That sounded sarcastic, but they are favorites of mine.
That's true. I know they are. Okay.
Yeah. Very few of these survive.
Oh my goodness.
Platinum is working as a waitress in a sort of weird sci-fi auto sex bar. While Iron is working as a construction worker, slowly corroding and losing his faculties as the rust claims his mind. No hope of a resurrection should he be damaged, since creator Will Magnus passed away years ago. Tin is destroyed, as is Mercury. They're the best ones. Gold has gone into hiding, mainly because of the fact that, as mentioned earlier, gold is more in demand than ever, and there are a lot of people who would like to capture him and melt him down. We get to see Gold towards the end, but he isn't much in evidence throughout the rest of the series. The metal man with the strangest fate is Lead, who has become an animated part of the shielding surrounding a closed-down nuclear reactor that is still considered to be dangerous. As a result of his activities, Lead is radioactive and will not be able to go near anyone for about 6 million years. The Metal Men are not major characters, but I think we should be able to get some darkly comic stuff out of them, as well as a lot of genuine poignance.
That's it. That's exactly what you were saying. It's like, as
Yeah,
ridiculous as
yeah,
all of that sounds, here he is saying that it's supposed to be funny.
yeah. It's yeah, all of this is tongue in cheek. Yeah, and again, that's exactly what it is. It's a mixture of dark comedy and poignance,
It's
which is
just
kind of
morbid.
which is what Moore does, and that's what League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is, isn't
That's
it?
exactly what it is. Yeah, like when I
Yeah,
was rereading League last year, I was like, the best part about this comic is that it takes all of these serious characters, puts them in a sandbox, and like basically says like it's like if a 12-year-old kid decided, how do we have fun with this?
yeah.
Yeah. Babar the elephant shows up for a panel.
Um, the characters from Minder are in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. For viewers, Minder is a British TV show that I'm obsessed with. British TV show from the 80s. But the two lead characters show up in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen for a panel, which made me very happy.
There's a moment in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen where Andy Cap walks by.
That's right,
Like,
yeah.
Andy Cap? Okay. Anything else to say about the Metal Men? I think that's about it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just think like they're never used well, the Metal Men, I think. They have bits and bobs of being quite good. There was some like backup stories with them that Kevin Maguire drew
Hmm.
about 10, 15 years ago, and they were really good. I didn't, but in Wednesday Comics,
That's what I
am
was
I
going to
made?
mention.
Yeah, did Jose Luis Garcia Lopez draw them?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that was great.
That
Yeah,
was
that
pretty
was really
good.
good. Yeah.
That was a really good run on
Yeah,
the Metal Men.
yeah,
Very very rare interiors by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Also
yeah.
oversized. Well worth checking out. Wednesday Comics.
Wednesday Comics was brilliant. Wednesday, was it the best thing Dan Didio ever did? Wednesday
Yes.
Comics. Yeah, definitely was, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
I don't even have to think about that. Yes.
No, it really was brilliant.
Interestingly, after the Metal Men, we're talking about Robot Man. Still alive and clanking after all these years, this former Doom Patrol member is one of the few people hanging around the barrio who still has an ear amongst the superheroes in the houses. He is friendly with Cyborg of the Titans, who he is maybe helping to adjust to his new, mostly robotic state. He also has contact with the Justice League since he was once close to the Teen Titans, and since three X-Titans, Wonder Girl, Kid Flash, and Aqualad are now amongst the Justice League membership. Mostly, though, he just hangs around the barrios, maybe going out for an evening at the cinema with Platinum when she's finished work, or calling by the construction site to talk to Iron. I figure a character who can cross the social boundaries will be useful, and it's nice to have someone from the Doom Patrol represented. That just sounds to me like he's just a plot device.
I don't know though, because it feels very fitting to me. And what's interesting here, again, going with this theme of like characters being used in certain ways, this, a character that can cross these social boundaries in this way, who's kind of friends with lots of different people in the superhero community from different levels of the superhero community. It kind of brings Ben Grimm to mind, the thing.
Yes.
And that's kind of how Robot Man was used in Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol as a sort of, almost like a voice and eyes of the reader character. Like Cliff Steele, Robot Man, and Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol is definitely got strong Ben Grimm vibes for me. Something absolutely crazy is happening, and Robot Man's just there like, what the hell is this? I don't even know. I'm just going to punch this guy, which is basically what Ben Grimm does in in Fantastic Four. And so yeah, that's, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but that's the vibe I got from what Alan's talking about here.
This is Cliff Steele, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's the impression I got because
As Doom
former Doom
Patrol.
Patrol member.
Yeah. Not Golden Age Robot Man.
Yeah,
Interesting that you compare Robot Man to the Thing, because the myth is that the Doom Patrol and the X-Men were ripoffs of each other, but that couldn't be possible because they came out at around the same time and it takes comics months to make.
mm.
What is most probably true is that the Doom Patrol was a ripoff of the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Because four members, one of them is a big brain, one of them stretches, the other one flies and shoots and is made out of energy, and the other one is a disfigured monster.
Yeah. There we go.
So,
Do you know what's interesting
yeah, go
about?
ahead.
Oh God, sorry.
Well, yeah, because
Well,
you were talking about him being being essentially what's going to be the heart,
yeah,
and that is in fact what the Thing is. I was going to say, you do this now, and this person is Dick Grayson.
yeah, absolutely. But like we said before, this wasn't Dick Grayson at the time in 1987.
Yes.
But like the connection between the Fantastic Four and the Doom Patrol is really interesting because, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here. In like Kirby's original pitch for Fantastic Four that he wrote, I'm sure there's like a pitch out there somewhere that Kirby wrote.
It's a pitch by Stan.
It is a pitch by Stan, is it? Okay.
It's controversial in that a lot of people think it was just written afterwards to provide evidence
Right.
for stuff.
That's what I'm thinking of, I think, yeah. But in this pitch, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been years since I read it, there's a lot more sort of like the horror of their powers is focused on, like Sue can't turn visible again,
Yeah.
for a start, yeah. And so they would have been very much more like the Doom Patrol were at that point.
That's what it is.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of favorites, this time I am being sarcastic.
Are you not a fan of this next guy?
I think he gets pushed to the forefront more than he should.
Do you know what it is? I think you're probably right, but I've just been reading Starman again, and this character is really cool in Starman.
This character is really cool in Starman, that's true.
Yeah, so I think that's the version I've got in my brain at the moment. So Adam Strange. Adam Strange is trapped on Earth, but is still in contact with the alien alliance based around the new House of Lanterns on the moon of Mars. He is sort of a mole, and he will eventually figure largely in the aliens' plan to invade Earth and liberate it from superhero dominance. We see him around a lot, but don't realize who he is until near the end of the series. There are maybe other characters that I don't have anything clear in mind for as yet, but who I'll want to include when the time comes. I figure I ought to list them here so that any real problems can be sorted in advance. I might want to use the Challenges of the Unknown, the Golden Age Flash, Roy Raymond, Bobo the Detective Chimp, Johnny Quick, the Black Condor, the Ray, Sarge Steele, and perhaps a few old villains from here and there. One thing that this series will enable us to do, if it should be called for, is to simply introduce a new and revamped group, like the Challenges of the Unknown, as an established fact, to try them out on the reader before launching them in a new title, which should be borne in mind.
There was, in fact, a new Challengers of the Unknown series a few years later.
Yeah, there was. Was that the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale one?
By the legendary team of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
I really love that series. It's really good. Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, recommend it. Again, Brian Boland covers.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about this. Adam Strange is a bad guy, apparently.
Yeah, like a traitor to Earth.
How do you, like, if you're an Adam Strange fan, how do you even walk out of this thinking like, oh yeah, he could have his own series soon, which he did soon after this.
He did, didn't he? You're right. But I haven't read Tom King's recent series for Adam Strange, but isn't he kind of a bad guy in that?
That's
like a war
true.
criminal.
Little bit of a war criminal.
Yeah. Poor old Adam Strange.
I do enjoy this group of characters that he mentions.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
nothing to
definitely.
say about them. I do enjoy that Bobo the Detective Chimp is here.
But again, you can really see that he was reading comics as a child at the same time as my friend Harry was, because these comics that Harry gave me, it's loads of Adam Strange stuff as well, loads of Blackhawk. It's all these same characters turning up. Um, Again, we've got some more quality comic characters turning up in this as well.
Yes. We have the Black Condor, we have the Ray. Is Sarge Steele a quality comic character?
Oh, I can't remember. No,
I don't
he's
know.
Charlton.
Oh, he's Charlton. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, just as an aside, I bloody love the Ray. I think he's great.
The original Ray?
Yeah. This the his son, because there's a Christopher Priest series from the 90s that you never hear about, but
Really?
which I absolutely love. That's got the Ray in it, and I really recommend. If you ever see any issues of it in a bargain bin, it's got some early Howard Porter art on it as well.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
yeah. It's a really good series. It's got Vandal Savage in it as well. It's brilliant. So,
Okay.
yeah.
See, watch our show for more recommendations out of nowhere.
There we go.
Uh,
Okay, I think that's about it as far as the character sketches go. So I'll get down to a sketchy outline of the central plot. This is the area I have the least worked out in detail, although I have the overall picture pretty clearly. So maybe I'll just trust to luck and hope it comes together as I go along. If not, I hope you'll bear with me and I'll clarify and polish the weak points at some later date. As before, since the plot comes in two sections with the central narrative and the framing linking device, I'll discuss the plot in two parts for the sake of greater clarity, starting with a description of the events that make up the framing sequence. As before, since this is a time travel story, telling things in chronological sequence is sometimes difficult to do without getting muddled, but I'll give it my best shot.
The framing device. The plot of the framing device is as follows. The story starts at its ending in a one-page prologue that takes place at the end of 1987 in a bar someplace in New York. John Constantine sits drinking alone, looking very bitter and pissed off at somebody or other. A striking and personable blonde enters the bar and, noticing Constantine, leans over and asks him for a light. Constantine, sitting there with a crumpled letter in one bunched fist and a glass in the other, glances up at her and then stares at her as if transfixed. We close up on his face and then move into flashback. Basically, the whole series is what passes through Constantine's mind in the 2 seconds it takes him to respond to the girl asking him for a light. We flash back to the beginning of 1987, when Constantine is surprised by a visit from Rip Hunter, who he doesn't know, but who appears to know everything about Constantine, including some very personal details that Constantine has never told a living soul about. Intrigued, Constantine listens to Hunter's story. Hunter tells him about how he's been marooned in time for subjective months, stranded at the House of Tomorrow in the world of Twilight. Hunter tells him about how, in this world, he had met up with an older version of John Constantine, who was somehow instrumental in Hunter's escape back to his own time, after the events to be chronicled in Twilight have concluded. This elder Constantine, explaining about the flux that exists in the time stream, explains that there is a better than good chance that of the potential future Earths waiting in the fluke down the time stream from our present, this future Earth is the one most likely to actually happen, with all of its chaos and carnage. It's a world of war, and it ends with all of the super beings being either killed or exiled from Earth forever, giving Hunter enough personal information to convince the younger Constantine and get him to aid Hunter in his mission to alert the people concerned and avert this nightmare future. The elder Constantine sends Hunter back in time with his dire story of horrors waiting in the future that must be averted. Hearing Hunter's tale, although the readers don't hear it all at first, Constantine the Younger is convinced enough to help the time traveler contact some of the various personages affected and tell them the bits of the story that are relevant to them, maybe in their own books or maybe in Twilight itself. This framing device has its own resolution, but I'll leave that till later. Gotta say, John Constantine and Rip Hunter is not a combination that I think I've ever seen.
It's an exciting combination, though, isn't it?
I like it.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to what Alan was saying, like, oh, we don't want Blue Devil teaming up with who did he say?
Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing, yeah, or yeah. Whatever.
Yes, we do.
We do, yeah, and we want Rip Hunter, and again, just reality or the real life comics actually echoing this in a weird way. Rip Hunter ends up being really important. Jeff Johns uses him quite a lot, doesn't he?
Yes, and it all starts with what, 0 Hour? Like ever since 0 Hour, Rip is just everywhere.
Yeah, because the character Hunter from the Linear Men he's supposed to be Rip Hunter, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So yeah, he gets used a lot in that. And isn't he supposed to be he's supposed to Gold's son, isn't he?
That's right. Like. That's right, he is.
Yeah. I really like that.
And Booster doesn't know, right?
Booster doesn't know, yeah.
That's right, he is. He is Booster Gold's son.
Yeah.
Rip Hunter is not his real name. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And I know he's being used as well. I've not been reading it because I'm waiting for the trade, but he's being used in Jeff Johns' recent Justice Society of America series.
Did you notice that he doesn't really, in the previous sections, he doesn't really talk about Rip Hunter? He talks about the House of Tomorrow, but he doesn't really talk about Rip Hunter. And it turns out Rip is really important. So
yeah. And something else that occurred to me while you were reading that is that, in a weird way, we kind of eventually met this Constantine, so the older Constantine, because in Hellblazer, he aged in real time, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
So by the time Hellblazer finished, he must have been around 60 or something, I think. So, yeah, we kind of started off with the younger Constantine, and we met the older Constantine the long way around, in a weird sort of way.
That's true.
It's quite nice.
I do think it's, as with anything time travel related, I do think there is an easy solution to prevent the future events, and I do think we will get to that.
Yes. So, the central plot. This is the main central plot of Twilight. I can't believe we've just got to the central plot.
This is like the smallest section.
Yeah. This is the main central plot of Twilight, being the story that Hunter tells Constantine and that Constantine passes on to the other parties involved. And it deals with the world of the Twilight. I don't have it broken down issue by issue or anything, but the rough shape is something like this. In the middle of 1995, or earlier, when society was starting to break down, many of the villains on Earth tried to take advantage of this situation by exploiting the uncertainty and disaster. Incensed by this, the current Justice League decide to go on the offensive for the first time and plan a careful campaign that will remove all the supervillains forever. They enlist the aid of a lot of other superheroes in this, and they are mostly very effective. So effective, in fact, that they begin to be seen as the only effective force for reason and order in a fast crumbling world. This goes to the assembled heroes' heads a little, and in an attempt to secure their new power base, they pass a majority motion outlawing aliens from Earth. While this is passed and is rigorously enforced, it is one of the decisions that causes the first serious rift in the ranks of the assembled superdoers, with some small groups like the Titans starting to drift away from the main group. This process continues until the state of the ruling houses is pretty much as described above, with the House of Secrets containing the only supervillains to survive the purge other than those who reformed. and the House of Lanterns demolished upon Earth and temporarily relocated upon Mars, pending the planned secret invasion. At the start of our story proper, there's quite a lot of different activity going on in various camps. The House of Steel and Thunder, each suffering their own internal stresses, are preparing for the marriage of the delinquent Superboy with Mary Marvel Jr., daughter of Captain and Mary Sr. This is this is a development that causes considerable anxiety all over the place. Previously, even the two most powerful houses could not attempt to exert any pressure upon the others for fear that the other houses would unite against them. Both houses knew that individually they couldn't hope to take on the assembled might of the Titans, Justice League and others. This preserved a status quo of sorts. However, with the prospect of an alliance in the offing, it seems quite possible that the assembled forces of 3 people with the power of Superman, 4 people with the power of Captain Marvel, and Wonder Woman, into the bargain, could easily smash the most firm resistance. This prospect worries both the houses of Titans and Justice tremendously. It also worries the villains, remaining at the House of Secrets, who remember back to the purges of the 90s and shudder. It certainly alarms the people living in the barrio, who, though downtrodden, still have a certain amount of liberty, impoverished though it be, and are not actually living under the absolute dictatorship that could result from a marriage between the houses of Steel and Thunder. The other major party alarmed by the prospect of the assembled alien forces that are conspiring out on the moon of Mars. They don't like the thought of a planet ruled by an unstoppable superhuman elite purely because it might very quickly pose a threat to the aliens' own well-being. Their plan is cryptic, but we learn a bit of it at a time. The main thrust of their plan is that they intend to use Adam Strange's place as their agent on Earth to set up a Zeta beam link through which an inviting army of Hawk people, superpowered Green Martians, and members of the Green Lantern Corps could materialize in the center of Times Square or somewhere, this plan being linked to a Thanagarian plan that has to be abandoned in the current issues of Swamp Thing, resurrected here to much more spectacular purposes. So I just going to pause there, I think, to talk about that. Do you know what this made me think of?
What?
You'll have to tell me here the dates. When was Squadron Supreme written?
Before Watchmen.
I mean, this is a lot. This is heavy Squadron Supreme vibes. That
really is.
description he gives of how the heroes all fell out and got greedy, and that's Squadron Supreme.
And Hyperion, the Superman analog, and Power Princess, the Wonder Woman analog, getting together. By the way, one Superman could take out the House of Titans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also find it funny that he keeps on mentioning the power of Superman, the power of Captain Marvel, and Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman.
Poor Wonder Woman. Poor Wonder Woman. Jesus Christ. Okay.
I mean,
it is very, yeah.
I like, just to talk a bit more about Wonder Woman, it's like she gets the short straw in all of these. Like in Injustice, she plays the same role. You know, it's like she's always Superman's sidekick in these things, fascist Superman sidekick. And I just
even in Kingdom Come.
Even in Kingdom Come. And wouldn't it be great to see like an Elseworld where there has to be a fascist Superman again, whatever, just to see Wonder Woman being the one fighting against that, which really you'd think would be a thing, you know?
Yeah. There's a pretty famous story where Superman is a communist in Russia.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman is his sidekick there too.
This is it. I mean, and she wouldn't be. She wouldn't be. Like the whole thing about Wonder Woman, and I suppose if you're pulling at this thread, Superman wouldn't be either. But just assume Superman's separate. Okay, he's gone fascist. Wonder Woman, she left Paradise Island originally to fight fascists, you know? That's the whole reason she left.
That's her core. That is the core of her being.
Yeah.
She's about peace.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that story. We're having this evil dystopia where the superheroes have gone rogue, and it's not Batman fighting against them; it's Wonder Woman, because yeah, she would be.
I do think there is a history of DC not giving, let's face it, the greatest female character superhero ever made, uh, her the respect she deserves. Because we
Mm,
mentioned Armageddon 2001 earlier, but like I said, there was another 1991 crossover. It was called War of the Gods. War of the Gods was pitched by George Perez to Karen Berger, and she was the one championing it, and it was going to be this whole thing. And then Karen Berger got pregnant and went on maternity leave. And because there was nobody around to champion it, people just kind of forgot about it, like as it went along, uh, deciding instead to focus on the other 1991 crossover, Armageddon 2001. So this is like your very rare instance of having a crossover led by Wonder Woman, and your entire crew doesn't care.
mm. And it goes back to what we were saying before. I mean, a lot of the times they don't have a handle on it. They don't know what to do with it. And I'm not saying, I could do any better or whatever, but for God's sake, there must be so many writers out there who do get it and who want to crack at it.
Especially now, I think. I
Yeah,
think now
yeah,
you'd probably have a lot more writers. But again, like I said, this is how you know when a woman is being written by a man.
yeah,
As
yeah,
great as Alan is, there's really only so much he can bring to a character like Wonder Woman.
yeah,
If
yeah.
and that's even if he cared. Have you ever read his Glory?
No, no. Is it? I mean, I've seen it pop up in Supreme, but
Yeah.
I've not read him actually writing her in her own book.
So you have read Supreme, right?
Yeah,
Supreme
yeah, yeah,
Supreme is basically his stand-in for Silver Age Superman. Glory
yeah.
is his treatment was a Golden Age Wonder Woman, and it wasn't the same. Like you could clearly see in the two issues of that versus the however many issues of Supreme, you could clearly see that he was a Superman fan and not really a Wonder Woman fan. It is
Mm,
very evident.
yeah. And Golden Age Wonder Woman, if you're doing Golden Age Wonder Woman, that stuff was bonkers. There's so much fun stuff you could do with that.
There is. And I think he tries to, but I don't think he
Yeah.
has the love for it.
Uh, that's a shame.
He did end up using the non-Golden Age Wonder Woman stuff for Promethea later on.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So that's interesting. Okay, so that's the rough background. Down at Sandy's, the bums are hanging out. Uncle Sam muttering in the corner, Plastic Man dropping by for a drink with Blackhawk before they both go to cruise the bars uptown. Dollman scuttling around his vivarium, and so on. Oliver and Dinah are publishing their newspaper, with a question occasionally dropping by for a political argument with Ollie or to pass on a bit of information. His current case is one that has him totally mystified. A midget turned up at a rough trade bar, was seen by witnesses, finally vanishing to an upstairs room with a very tall, very beautiful call girl that nobody had ever seen before. When the door was broken down, this after nobody had emerged from the room for some several hours, the body of the midget was found bound and gagged with his neck broken by a single clean blow. The room was locked with no other possible exit. The call girl was gone. There was no murder weapon. This little conundrum will continue to puzzle them throughout the series until we get a few shaking revelations in the end. I will say that when Alan Moore does a mystery, so the most famous one being Watchmen, if you reread the book, the answer is very obvious. But as you're reading the book for the first time, it's not necessarily obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of comic book mysteries aren't reading them as mysteries, they're not very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most obvious one that comes to mind is The Long Halloween. Like everyone talks about it as a mystery, and it judged as a mystery is rubbish. There's no mystery there. There's no way you could work out that ending because it comes from nowhere. There's no clues that would lead you to that, really. And it's an ambiguous ending anyway. You know, we don't really know whether the person who's supposed to have done it at the end of Long Halloween really did it all, or some of it, or none of it, or you know.
A
So it's not a
bad
mystery at
mystery.
all. It's a
It's a
bad
bad mystery.
mystery. um, but yeah, I feel it's all right to slack off Long Halloween because I've picked up Loeb and Sales Challenges the Unknown series, so I balanced it out, you know.
Fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah,
But
but you're right.
yes. So in comic terms, you're right. You know, Watchmen is a really good mystery, judged comparing it to other mainstream comic book mysteries, and this would have been quite a good mystery as well, I think.
I think so. And knowing what the answer is to this, I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should have seen that coming, but I did not. The first time I read this, I absolutely did not see it coming.
Yeah. In the houses themselves, things are unsettled. At the House of Steel, both Superman and Super Wonder Woman are worried about their delinquent son and his increasingly difficult to conceal tendencies towards sadism and sociopathic behavior. They're also worried about their daughter, who they cannot find a suitable suitor for, since Captain Marvel Jr. doesn't appear to be interested in her. Captain Marvel Jr.'s disinterest is largely due to the fact that he is madly and passionately in love with Mary Marvel Sr. and is liaising with her behind Captain Marvel Sr.'s back. Their relationship has grown difficult of late, largely because the increasingly erratic and cranky behavior of the captain seems to have taken a turn for the worse. All of the Marvel family have had problems with the fact they have two sets of bodies, neither of which ever age in the slightest. But Mary and Junior have solved this by more or less giving up their human identities. This doesn't worry them, mainly because they are a lot closer to the age of their counterpart than, say, Billy Batson is to his alter ego. I should point out that, for reasons I've yet to find a good explanation for, the Marvel family seem to grow in their superhuman forms to an ideal age and then stop. Thus, Mary and Junior are both around 25 in their superhuman forms, as is Captain Marvel himself, since he is already the ideal age and hasn't grown up anymore in the intervening years. All three are still children if they happen to say Shazam, but the only one who still uses the word is the big red cheese himself, unable to give up his human self as Mary and Junior have done. Hanging on to his Billy Batson identity has caused a lot of problems for the captain, as well as in his relationship with his wife, but these seems to have become a lot better recently. Now, however, there is a new element that is perhaps even more threatening. Whereas before, Captain Marvel was wrapped up enough in his personal problems to leave Mary and Junior lots of time together, lately he has started to make more normal marital demands upon Mary's time. He's even being extra nice to her, which worries her like anything. There are other oddities of behaviour. The captain will no longer go down and sit and talk with Mr. Talky Tawny, as had been a regular habit of his. In the midst of all this, there are problems with Mary Jr., who really doesn't want to marry Superboy at all. So there's a lot going on there. Like, again, didn't you say that at this point in time, Mary and Billy were the same age?
They're the same age. Well, wait,
Yeah.
hold on. Okay, so this is 1987.
Mm.
Legends had just come out, which
Yeah.
means that also about to come out at the time was the prequel to Legends, which is Roy Thomas and Tom Mandrake Shazam series, where there is no Mary and Freddy.
Okay.
But before that, yes, they're the same age, except for whatever reason, Billy turns into adult Captain Marvel and Mary Batson turns into the same age, exactly what she looks like, Mary Marvel. Also, one of her powers is the beauty of Hestia.
Right.
No, wait, no, the beauty of Aphrodite.
Right.
Except she looks exactly the same as Mary Batson, so I guess Mary Batson is as beautiful as Aphrodite.
Oh, that's nice.
But yes, they're the same age.
So I feel like Alan's not really interested in the Shazam characters as Shazam characters. I mean, he's interested in the fact that they're kids and their secret identities, but I think that's about it. And the fact that they're as powerful as Superman. Like, what's the wizard doing in all this?
That's true. It doesn't say anything about the wizard.
Yeah,
And the wizard would ruin this.
yeah.
I feel
So,
like the last two paragraphs together would just being read together, things kind of fall very into place very easily.
yeah.
Of note though, Moore did make his name on Marvel Man, which is a Shazam ripoff.
Of course. Yeah.
So this is not really the first time that he's done this, where they're stuck in a particular body.
Mm,
Because except in maybe the reason that they don't age in their human bodies is because in Marvel Man they did.
mm. Yeah. Or is the implication that they just don't spend enough time in their human bodies to age?
Also a possibility. Yeah.
Mm,
That's also there. But they Junior and Mary, for example, are the same age as they are with in their human bodies as their superhero bodies. Which is something that he also did in Marvel Man, because the first time we see Johnny Bates, we don't
yeah,
know if he's Johnny Bates. And we don't
yeah,
know if he's Kid Miracle Man.
that's true.
And when he does, so he is, spoiler, he is in fact Kid Miracle Man masquerading as an adult, and when he turns back into Johnny Bates is a kid.
Yeah. Do you know what though? I feel like this hasn't got this sort of Moore's elegance. You can tell this is like a pitch, yeah, because it feels like, like for example, I think he even admits that he doesn't know why they haven't aged. You
Yeah,
know, um, and the only reason that they haven't aged in their mortal forms really is because it serves his twist that he's setting up.
exactly.
Yeah. So that Alan Moore elegance isn't quite there with this, I think. But again, this is early stages.
And once again, you know who definitely read this? Alex Ross.
Yeah.
Because the idea also of not knowing whether it's Billy or Captain Marvel, that is full on in play in Kingdom Come. And we keep talking about
Absolutely.
Mark Waid in Kingdom Come. So we're falling prey to that thing that I hate, which is talking only about the writer. But Alex Ross is the Shazam fan between those two.
Yeah. That's true. And it's interesting as well, like Alex Ross, you reckon he was influenced by Uncle Sam in this pitch, possibly.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
maybe, if Wade didn't read this, again, Alex Ross, there's a good chance he did, maybe.
I believe Alex definitely did.
Yeah.
He can confirm all of this if he eventually comes on my show.
Oh, he should. Yes, definitely.
I don't think he does interviews though. So
Yeah.
okay. We can't talk about that any further without jumping the gun. So let's continue. In the background of all this, we see John Constantine moving around amongst the various characters, gathering a bit of information here and there, obviously conducting some plan that he has in mind. Remember, this is the older Constantine we're talking about here. He seems to be paying particular attention to the areas of stress between the various houses. And it becomes quickly apparent that although he's older, he's still in the habit of manipulating people in various cryptic ways for reasons unclear to anyone but himself. As things progress, we see the paranoia concerning the coming wedding between the houses of Steel and Thunder amongst the lesser houses start to come to a boiling point. The Titans, directed by a ruthless and embittered Nightwing, that's such a weird thing to read, maybe approached the Justice League proposing that the two houses should join forces, along with maybe the villains in the House of Secrets, to stand against the possible threat of being overrun by the houses of Steel and Thunder. Maybe an uneasy alliance is formed between the three houses, although the houses of Mystery and Tomorrow are not at all interested in joining in. a plan starts to emerge for a massed attack upon the houses of Steel and Thunder, perhaps even on the wedding day itself, in the hope that both houses can be eliminated and the country divided up between the victors. Meanwhile, we see Blackhawk continuing to recruit his new Blackhawks, and we see Constantine starting to step up his plan, making contact with more and more of the people he's going to need to accomplish it. For one thing, we see him finally manage to make contact with the elite council of the Shadow, the Batman, and maybe Doc Savage and Tarzan as well, and learn of their plan to oust all the superheroes from Earth. Constantine seems eager to help them with this, although we aren't sure about how much of a double game he's playing. He also makes contact with Adam Strange, and through gaining Strange's confidence, learns of the aliens' planned attack upon Earth. Constantine seems eager to help with this plan as well. In fact, as Constantine brushes against the various groups involved, it becomes clear that he is promising his undivided assistance to all of them. Oh, wow. It is maybe during this period that he calls at the House of Tomorrow and makes the acquaintance of Rip Hunter, who also figures in his plans. Beyond this, he also spends a lot of time hanging out with a question and around the offices of Blackfeathers, seeming to be everywhere at once as he works his dubious and incomprehensible scheme. So, like we said earlier, the reason that all of this eventually works is because at the heart of it, it is a John Constantine story.
Yeah. But almost like John Constantine stories hadn't been invented yet. Almost, that is just him in Swamp Thing, and that's it. So, yeah.
But like
he's inventing. Yeah.
But like you said, he's fully formed right out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so weird to read the words "a ruthless and embittered Nightwing." It's like reading if I were reading this saying like, "Oh, directed by a ruthless and embittered Peter Parker."
Yeah. Ruthless and embittered. I suppose ruthless and embittered Ben Grimm. He was pretty ruthless and embittered when he first appeared, wasn't he?
A ruthless and embittered Johnny Storm.
Yes, that's what I'm going for. Yeah.
So weird. The other thing I want to call out: John Constantine promising everyone his undivided assistance kind of calls to mind his arguably his most famous story, which is Dangerous Habits.
Dangerous Habits. Yeah.
That's the one where he makes deals with 3 different demons for his soul, and by the time that he's almost dying, they all have a claim to his soul, so they have no choice but to heal him and let him live.
Yeah. As the plot builds up in momentum, it is this ingenious and baffling juggling act of Constantine's that becomes the main attraction. We see him urging on the Justice League Titans to their attack upon the Houses of Thunder and Steel, and yet we see him call at the House of Thunder and speak to Captain Marvel himself, telling him of a planned attack. This is a key scene. Constantine tells the captain of the attack and asks him not to do anything to help the House of Steel in the thick of the battle. When the captain politely asks Constantine why he should do this, when he is, after all, supposedly intent upon cementing the union between the Houses of Steel and Thunder, lighting a cigarette, Constantine smiles and says that he thinks the captain already knows what the reasons are. The captain flinches back from the match as Constantine strikes it with a look of terror which passes, changing into a smile at Constantine's cleverness. He agrees to go along with Constantine so far as it suits his own plans. Clue.
My initial thought is that in 1987, interesting, in 2023, the moment the scene happens, the moment the issue ends, there is inevitably a Reddit thread talking about that one scene and a bunch of people giving their explanations.
Yeah,
so the mystery would be spoiled months before the reveal happened.
And also, even though like that was a weakness, that was a factor, yeah, the big clue here was a known factor in a certain character. I'm really dancing around this. There is a particular Grant Morrison JLA comic that came out around, I know, 97, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That made that factor a lot more prominent. And I think people, because of that issue of JLA, people would be quicker to catch on these days.
It's very it was a very early issue as well.
Yeah.
There's really no way to keep talking about this without jumping the gun, so let us move on.
Yeah.
While urging the Titans Justice League to strike while the iron is hot and simultaneously urging Captain Marvel not to defend his allies, Constantine is at the same time urging the Batman Shadow Group to hold back in their attack upon the superpowers until a more advantageous time. After he has explained his plan to them, although not to the reader, they agree. On top of all this, Constantine is acting as a fifth columnist to the planned alien invasion through Adam Strange. He urges Strange to commence the alien invasion after the Titans League and the Houses of Steel and Thunder have had a chance to weaken and decimate each other at the wedding. This sounds sensible, and they readily agree. As if this wasn't thoroughly confusing enough, Constantine also has a number of other irons in the fire. Oh, literally? In the barrio, he is seen at various times searching for two people. One of these is the vanished metal man, Gold. The other is an old crippled man who was reputed to live somewhere in the barrio that nobody knows the history of. Eventually, Constantine finds both of these. Gold, after leading him on with some story or other, tricks cruelly and has melted down. Wow. So after like talking about how Gold is barely in the story, that's the only thing we know. Anyway, the old man, when he finds him, he is much more careful with. I don't know when I'll reveal the information, but this old man is in fact Metron, formerly of the New Gods, banished to Earth for some treachery that he's committed in the past, where the temptation to uncover new knowledge became too much for the feeble moral restraints that he places upon himself. What Constantine wants with Metron is fairly straightforward. He wants the Mobius chair, although we don't find out why until later. I should point out that these various plot threads will be spread out dramatically, intercut with developments in the lives of the other characters, so it won't be all about John Constantine, endearing though I obviously find him. For example, while planning the raid upon the Houses of Steel and Thunder, the assembled Houses of Titans, Justice, and Secrets will attempt to press gang various heroes into the barrio into their army with mixed results. Some of the barrio heroes either reluctantly or willingly go along with the revolutionary houses, while some other people are enlisted by Constantine to aid in his master plan. When we finally have the various factions set up and defined, even if there are some ambiguous areas, we let the climactic fireworks commence.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Kingdom Come in there with a recruitment scene.
Yes, definitely.
But also Constantine and the New Gods. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, he must have met the New Gods at this point, at some point in the past 10 years, I reckon. But nothing springs to mind.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
But especially since he's back in the DC universe, I assume it has happened.
Yeah. Maybe in the New 52 or I don't know. But yeah, that would have been fantastic. And the Mobius chair, I mean, it pops up so much, doesn't it? I mean,
now it does.
Yeah. Like it was really, that was one really cool thing. Do you ever read the Dark Side War from the New 52 Justice League? And Batman's sitting in it. I love that. And of course,
Wally West.
Wally West, yeah. Wally West less successfully, I think. But Charles Xavier sitting in it in the X-Men Teen Titans crossover, that was really cool.
Yeah, that one was a no-brainer to do.
So imagine that we could have had like John Constantine in the Mobius chair. That would have been awesome.
The best thing about John Constantine is that as a magician, he's no magician you've ever experienced because he's a bum.
Yeah.
Also, outsmarting Metron seems to be a thing, no? Like,
yeah.
because he's so defined as like a really smart guy that like outsmarting him is like just a thing to do, to the point where I am now doubting how smart Metron really is.
Well, I think everyone knows Metron's cheat codes now, don't they? Like, all you gotta do is tempt him with knowledge, and he'll do anything you want. Like,
That's true.
yeah,
Poor Gold.
yeah, I know. That must have. That's one of these scenes where, like, I'm kind of glad this never got made because that would have been really sad.
I mean, that's the thing, is like if he's talking about possible spin-offs after this, like nobody's gonna want to read the Metal Men after this.
Yeah,
I just know that again, it worked for Kingdom Come and Captain Marvel, partly because he does have a very compelling redemption arc in it,
yeah.
but also because Captain Marvel, in his visual presentation, to borrow a phrase from our friend Lamar, like in Kingdom Come, he still looks cool.
Yeah, and I think if you get a character turning up and getting to slap Superman around for a bit, I mean that's going to make people think he's cool just by
Yeah.
default. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the one character there where it doesn't look, where he's presented exactly as he was.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no there's no like modern reinvention of his costume or whatever. That's
Yeah.
that's who he is.
Yeah. And there's no sort of trying to sort of sell him as wizard Superman, which is kind of what they're going for these days. I feel
Yes.
in his look. He's the big red cheese, isn't he?
That's exactly who he is.
Yeah.
Such a cool costume that it has barely ever been changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
On the wedding day, the planned attack by the Titans, Justice League, and villains upon the houses of Steel and Thunder gets underway. The losses are heavy upon both sides. Wonder Woman, the former Wonder Girl, is killed in battle by Superwoman, formerly Wonder Woman, who is herself killed by Captain Atom. No, no way. No way. No.
There is no, the ultimate sign of disrespect for among everything else in this proposal is that Wonder Woman is killed by Captain Atom.
Do you think Kingdom Come, in a way, sort of broke Captain Atom? Because now I kind of feel like he's known as the character who blows up in a nuclear explosion if he splits his pants. Like, it's like that's his thing now. you know?
Well, in an alternate reality, he's a bad guy named Monarch.
Yes, that's
So my favorite thing about Captain Atom is, and I just think this works really well for him. I see him as Fire Lord, as DC's Fire Lord. You know what I'm saying? Which is like, who is somebody really powerful that we just need beaten up just to establish how much more powerful this other guy is? Oh yeah, we'll throw Captain Atom in there.
And he's also kind of like superpowered government stooge, isn't he? Like,
That's
that's
exactly
always
it.
his role.
That's
Um,
also what his role in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon. He just
yeah,
sucks.
yeah. I feel like he's got a lot of potential, though. Obviously, like as a sort of Morrison kind of explored him quite interestingly, I think, but very heavily influenced by Doctor Manhattan.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's
Um,
that's basically a different Captain Atom altogether. It's basically
yeah,
Dr. Manhattan.
absolutely. And if you think about it, like Captain Atom's Charlton's Superman, isn't he?
Yes.
So there must be something cool you can do with him beyond Doctor Manhattan, like and beyond just having him as a government stooge, who every other superhero slaps around.
Apparently not in 1987, where he kills Wonder
No.
Woman. I, there are a few things that I want to hate about this story, and that is one of them.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that sucks. That straight up sucks. That
we have such strong feelings about this that we didn't even let you finish the paragraph.
yeah. So Superboy is also killed, along with most of the Justice League Titans and supervillains. Captain Marvel, who has been expecting the attack after being warned by Constantine, is unharmed, while Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel decide to take advantage of the confusion to flee into space, where they hope to make a new home. Supergirl goes with them. That's rubbish. Okay. That's rubbish. Sorry, Alan.
Well, this is not Kara Zor-El. This is.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. But it's like, I know, just why even create Supergirl? I suppose, again, this is a pitch. This is all going to be fleshed out.
We'll flesh out Superboy and Supergirl later.
Yeah. So this leaves only Captain Marvel and a badly battered Superman standing amongst the bruised and bloodied remnants of an army of beaten superheroes. The attempted coup by the Titans League has been successfully repulsed, and 3 houses lie shattered. But all that remain of the 2 most powerful houses of all are the 2 archetypal superheroes standing back to back, waiting for what's going to be thrown at them next. Would you like to take over?
I will point out that I guess this is John Byrne Superman, so he wouldn't be that powerful.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose so, yeah. Like, you could get a bruised and bloody version of this Superman, whereas just a few years before you couldn't with pre-crisis Superman.
No, a few years before, Superman wipes the floor with every character that's been mentioned in this proposal.
Yeah, even Captain Atom.
Even the greatness that is Captain Atom. So here he is building up to these 2 superheroes who, the combination of which, like I mentioned, he was a mad reader, so the combination of which he's, clearly means something to him. And here he is about to subvert any and all fan expectations. This turns out to be the alien invasion. Arriving by Zeta Beam, an army of Hawkmen, Lanterns, and Martians pour into Earth and quickly get rid of what remains of the armies recruited by the Houses of Titans, Justice, and Secrets in their failed attempt at a coup. They then advance upon the main palaces. Superman isn't worried, since with Captain Marvel by his side, the 2 of them should still be just about powerful enough to send the invaders packing. This is where the surprise card is played. Captain Marvel isn't Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel has been dead ever since the story opened. Da-da-da!
Wow, what a twist.
This is the thing he's been building up to, and he's not going to do it. Right? The thing he's been building up to supposedly throughout the whole thing is Superman teaming up with Captain Marvel. Bang, he's not going to do it, period.
Yeah. That is great. But I'm still not convinced by this twist, if I'm honest.
Well, we will. Are you not convinced because of the explanation that is to follow, or are you just not convinced, period?
The explanation that's to follow.
Then let's get to it, Paul.
Yeah. It all started with little bitty Batson and his problem. There he was, unwilling to give up being human, still spending a lot of time in a child's body. The unfortunate thing was that though little Billy's body didn't age, his mind did. Trapped in a child's body but afflicted with adult needs, Billy went quietly well. Bats, I suppose. A lot of the problems were sexual. Physically, Billy was not capable of normal sex, and thus pretty soon began to experiment with more bizarre variations such as S&M, visiting the appropriate bars in clothing that made him look as grown up as possible, while he still had the face and body of a child. At a certain club on a certain night, Billy had met a strikingly tall call girl who seemed to meet his every fantasy requirement. They went to a room upstairs together and locked it from within. Billy was tied up and then agreed to be gagged. At this point, the call girl began to melt and change shape, shimmering as if through a heat haze before Billy's startled eyes. In the end, instead of a 6'6" human woman, Billy is staring at a 7.5 foot tall green Martian man. It is John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, on Earth, incognito, using his power of disguise. Billy, being gagged, cannot say Shazam and turn into Captain Marvel. Nor can he prevent the Manhunter snapping his neck with one blow of his hand. The Manhunter then walks out invisibly through the walls and leaves a dead midget and an insoluble mystery. The Manhunter has assumed the Captain's identity, being able to convincingly duplicate his powers in order to catch Superman by surprise when the alien invasion finally comes. This is why he flinched when Constantine struck a match, and why he didn't mind letting the 3 rebel houses and the House of Steel tear each other to bits. Okay, so I this doesn't work for me because, like, how young does he think Billy is for a start? You know, because it sounds here like, you know, Billy's like pre-pubescent, like, you know.
Historically, I think Billy's been around like 10 to 12, although that has changed in recent years.
Okay, so I'll buy that. Okay, Billy's trapped at 10 to 12 for some reason. And
He
not
does have a
aging.
he does have a regular job.
Yeah. But okay, assuming Billy's trapped at the age of 10, okay, I'll buy that. But like, why wouldn't anyone recognize that it's a 10-year-old child? Why would they assume it's a midget?
That's it. So like that's what I was gonna say. So at first he's wearing a disguise to make him look age appropriate.
Yeah.
But what forensic scientists afterwards can't see.
Yeah. And these prostitutes he's going to see as well. These sex workers he's going to see, like, they can't tell he's a child.
That's
You
it, yeah.
know?
It's weird.
It's very weird, and it doesn't quite work.
It doesn't work at all. This is one of those things that I guess he would have had to flesh out.
Yeah,
Um,
because it's one of those twists where, like, you hear it and you're like, but if you start thinking about it too much, it falls to bits.
no, yeah, because if he's only wearing clothing as a disguise, you know, I don't know how many of our viewers have actually been naked with people, but but you know, to do these things, you kind of have to not wear clothing. So
Yeah,
so yes, I don't think it works. Maybe he'd have figured out a way to work it out. I am unbelievably amused though by the idea of John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, standing right in front of a naked Billy Batson. It's just that gets memed immediately in 2023. It is terrible. Let's never go there again, Alan.
my other problem is, why does he want to turn into a 10-year-old boy to experience sex? Because we know Captain Marvel in his adult form is capable of having sex, because there's a whole thing about how he doesn't bother with Mary Marvel anymore. You know, he doesn't touch her in that way anymore.
They have a daughter.
You know? And they have a daughter. So even though they're brother and sister. So we know that happens. So I mean, it's a, you know, there is none of these problems. All of these problems, the only way they can be explained is with some really, really dark explanations. You know,
Yes.
like all these sex workers were basically cool with being with a 10-year-old boy, or Billy specifically wanted to be a 10-year-old boy to experience sex. You know, that's grim.
That's
That's really
very
grim.
And there he is saying he's unwilling to give up being human.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. It's like so he is stuck to this. And I
Yeah.
guess an interesting thing to me, moving off that particular topic a little bit, is would he have drawn a parallel between this and Congo Rilla?
Yeah. That's interesting because they're like two sides of the same coin, aren't they?
They are two sides of the same coin on this one. Um, but yeah, it doesn't work for me. This
Yeah.
twist does not work for me. There's
It's
other ways to have done this without going there.
yeah, this twist is either unspeakably grubby or unspeakably stupid. It's one or the other. It's the only way it works.
It could also be both.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The other thing that doesn't work for me is the continuation of this next paragraph, because by the way, the Martian Manhunter is vulnerable to fire and Superman has heat vision. Upon realizing how he has been set up, Superman fights with the Martian Manhunter, killing him with his heat vision. However, by this point, it is too late, and the assembled Martians and Green Lanterns have arrived. We have a powerful and intense sequence where Superman manages to smash his way through a lot of the alien forces single-handed, while being ring-whipped by the Lanterns, only to finally be beaten to death in single combat by the massive and frighteningly powerful Sodal Yat. The alien invasion is a complete success, and the coalition forces of the Martians, Guardians, and Thanagarians will now govern Earth forever and keep it nice and peaceful. It seems that in his dealings, Constantine's plan has gone awry unless he actually meant to impose an alien dictatorship upon Earth. Okay, famously, Alan Moore wrote a story where Superman kills Mr. Mxyzptlk and says nobody should have the right to kill. Here he is proposing another story where Superman will kill an old friend, the Martian Manhunter.
This is something as well that none of this I get is that. I mean, again, this is just a pitch. Maybe we'll see it fleshed. We would have seen it fleshed out, but how did these characters get to this point? It's like that's because they're different people, right? Superman is a different person here than he like. Why did they start fighting each other? It's maybe that would have got fleshed out. But I
Yeah.
feel that would need a series in itself. That needs a Squadron Supreme style series to explain how they went from point A to point B, from squeaky clean, square jawed superheroes to what they are here, killers, kinky killers.
Well, I mean, in Kingdom Come, they explained it in a flashback. But it
Yeah.
is a little rushed because basically what it says is like Superman had a really bad day and everyone just followed him.
Yeah. I guess it again we would get that. I guess like the logical thing here would be that awful explanation every time Superman goes bad. Lois Lane got killed, and it's
Well, Lois isn't in this story, Paul, so that's probably
that's true. She hasn't even been mentioned, so maybe that wouldn't have been the reason for it.
Yes. Okay.
It is at this point that the final pieces fall into place. The alien conquerors find themselves suddenly attacked by a small army of superheroes, these mostly being those recruited by Constantine, as well as the forces of the Council made up of Batman, the Shadow, etc. Most of these are wearing thin golden armor made from the body of the unfortunate Gold, which renders the otherwise omnipotent power rings of the Green Lanterns useless. The aliens are driven back and contained by the surprise attack of the others, and the battle seems to come to a Mexican standoff when one of the Hawk people or Green Lanterns points out that however valiantly the heroes fight, there is a massive army of combined extraterrestrial warriors ready to keep pouring onto the Earth until all resistance is squashed. It is at this point that Constantine plays his trump card. Using the Mobius chair of Metron, Constantine has visited the antimatter universe of Quad. In return for a firm promise of immunity for the planet Earth and its immediate system, Constantine has then sold them the secret of the boom tube, which he has also managed to wheedle from Metron. Thus, while the assembled aliens are preparing to pour into Earth via Zeta Beam, Thanagar, New Mars, Ran, and Oa are currently being overrun by a vast army of Quadian weaponeers.
Comics are so weird.
Like, what's that say?
Comics are so weird. Like, in any other story ever, like, if you have a whole thing that's going on, and then all of a sudden at the very end, you're like, oh, hey, here are some people from the antimatter universe, it would be considered a bad story.
Yeah. But this is the most elegant twist in the story. This is like,
And in this case, it actually works. The other thing I'm going to say is Alex Ross definitely read this, because melting down a metal man and having them as the armor of a superhero is the climax to Justice.
Of course, yes. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Oh, I like Justice. That's good, isn't it?
I did too.
It's fun. Yeah. That's good. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He's definitely read this.
He definitely read this. It's right there. There's too many things in here that has shown up in Alex Ross comics for him to not have read this.
So what we've decided, I think, by reading through this is that the two people most influenced by this in the whole world was Dan Didio and Alex Ross.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the third one is Jeff Johns.
Jeff Johns. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Stunned, the aliens are forced to return quickly to their respective homes to fight wars upon their own soil that may take them centuries to win, if they win them at all. For the most part, the only heroes left on Earth are the non-powered variety, and most of these are more than prepared to take off their masks and go public. Constantine explains to them that under the guidance of the Batman, the Shadow, and all the rest, American society, free of government or super dictatorship, will start to organize itself along different lines so that it can deal with a future without fear or anxiety. The days of the big powers are over, and henceforth America will be built up from much smaller and more flexible units, both socially and economically. The story of Twilight ends with a delighted John Constantine standing at the verge of a new utopia, free from the interferences of power, all superfolk banished from Earth forever. That's a really big Alan Moore theme for the 80s.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, isn't it, that it always stays with me. I read this article, this interview with Grant Morrison, Guardian did years ago, and they describe Miracle Man, Marvel Man, as a sort of lefty fantasy.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, Miracle Man taking over the world, basically, and embarrassing Margaret Thatcher as this sort of lefty fantasy. And it really terrified me that Grant Morrison read Miracle Man and thought that was a happy ending.
It was a different time.
Yeah, but this is the proper lefty fantasy, isn't it? This is the people overthrowing the powerful oppressors, like, the human beings overthrowing the super gods and driving the gods away.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
We didn't mention earlier that Superman gets killed by Sodam Yat. Sodam Yat doesn't actually show up until Jeff Johns.
Yeah. Of course. And he hasn't really been used since, I don't think, has he?
I don't think so.
No.
He is.
I love
the very definition of OP.
Yeah. I love how Kevin O'Neill draws Sodam Yat in his first appearance, just like hugely sort of muscular.
Definitely not what he ended up looking like.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So, of course, the story that he gives to Rip Hunter to take back to his past self, while it gives the gist of all this, doesn't give the whole story. This comes home to the younger Constantine right at the very end of the series, when we wrap up the framing device. Somewhere earlier on in the continuity, we'll have a scene where somebody says to Constantine that if he isn't careful, one day he'll run into somebody craftier than himself and get into a whole mess of trouble. To which Constantine replies confidently and with some justification that there isn't anybody smarter than him. At the very end of the series, he finds out differently. Having contacted all the hero groups and people involved and met with varying responses, Constantine is disturbed. Has he failed? Some of the people he warned have taken his advice, some haven't. Some he hasn't been able to reach at all. He is still thinking of this event in the future as being a terrible thing, and he fears that he might not have averted it well enough. All he has for consolation is the knowledge that, according to Hunter, at some point in this future, he's going to meet a woman who he will love very much for the rest of his life, and it will fill a big, lonely hole in him. He even knows, thanks to Hunter, how he will meet her. She'll come up to him in a bar and ask him for a light. Their eyes will meet, and that will be that.
Okay. While he is musing over the pros and cons of this, Hunter delivers the last part of his message from the future Constantine, which he has been instructed not to give the younger Constantine until after he has warned as many people as he can. Surprised, Constantine reads what may turn out to be the ultimate Dear John letter. Written by his future self, the letter apologizes for using his younger self so cynically, but assures John, the younger, that it's all for the best. The older Constantine, having the advantage of hindsight, can remember everything that happened to his younger self, including meeting with Rip Hunter, getting told a terrible story, and then launching on a mission to warn everybody affected of what waited in their future and how they might avert it. The elder Constantine can even remember how that all worked out. The world of Twilight came about anyway, often because of people's actions in response to his warning. He can even remember getting a letter handed to him, exactly the same as this one. He muses briefly over the paradox of who really wrote the letter originally before apologizing to his younger self again and consoling him with the fact that a wonderful woman is waiting in his near future and that she will be worth everything. Reading the letter, the younger Constantine is furious. It has turned out that there is someone craftier than John Constantine, namely, John Constantine, 20 years older and smarter. Constantine has been conned by himself. Worse, since the person who tricked him is 20 years away in an unreachable future, Constantine has no way of getting vengeance upon the person who did this to him. Angered and enraged, he goes into a bar and sits with a crumpled letter in his hand, getting drunk. This is the end of the story, and we only have a final one-page epilogue that takes us back to the beginning, now that we've come full circle. The woman enters the bar and notices John, asking him for a light. He looks up and their eyes meet. She is beautiful. He knows instantly that he could love this woman forever. Knows who she is, knows how happy him and all his future selves are going to be with her. And finally, perversely, he understands how he can have his revenge against his future self, how he can avert the circumstances that lead to Twilight by throwing a small but important spanner into the workings of destiny. "Excuse me, have you got a light?" says the woman. Constantine looks at her and blinks twice before replying. "No, I'm sorry, I don't smoke." The woman shrugs and after a while leaves the bar without speaking to Constantine any further. After she's gone, he sits, dead drunk, at a dimly lit corner table and cries his cold and cynical heart out.
So that sums up, I think, more than anything, that this is a John Constantine story. More than it's not a DC Universe story; it's a John Constantine story.
That's what it is,
and I love it because this is the best thing about this story. I think is like he doesn't avert this future. He doesn't sacrifice his relationship with this woman because he wants to avert all the heroes dying. He doesn't want to save any. He's doing it despite himself. He's just doing it to kick himself in the nuts. That's the only reason he's doing it. Someone's got one over on him and he doesn't like it. It's not just I mean, on the surface, it is John, cutting his nose off to spite his face, because of pride and spite. But also, it's the idea of a character like John refusing to just be like swept along with destiny and fate and having his future mapped out for him, and he's saying no to that, and he'd rather be miserable but free than a happy prisoner of fate. And again, I guess it reflects this larger sort of kicking out the gods, this rebellion from the future, of freeing the human race from these godlike beings that control their destiny. That's what
true.
John does. Yeah,
that's true. He breaks from. So the other plot hole I have in that is, why doesn't the older Constantine do that to the older Constantine?
I think it works there. Like these kind of time travel paradoxes. Like I've seen stuff like that before.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Why there is that question? Why didn't Constantine do that originally? But I think in the context of I think that works, that we're overlooking that, or we're not focusing on that, because the larger action that John is performing is worth it, and this twist ending is worth it,
And that's exactly why, for everything that we've talked about, that's why the story eventually works, is because of, if it's going to work, it's because of John Constantine. He is the star of the story.
And you couldn't have any other character playing this role
in the DC universe. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
I can't think of anyone.
I can't think of anyone.
They couldn't have Zatanna going around warning everyone.
No.
Or
it would
Willoughby
have to
Kipling.
It would have to be a pretty dark turn for anyone else. Like, in modern day, like Nightwing would be able to have the connections to talk to everyone, but this wouldn't work with Nightwing.
No.
It only works with John. I like it. I like the whole, everything John Constantine related in Twilight of the Superheroes works.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll just read the last bit then.
Yeah.
And that's it. I hope you can see how it's meant to fulfill all the requirements mentioned earlier. There are opportunities for new characters to get a springboard, all the characters to get a shot in the arm, and all the merchandising you can handle in terms of games and stuff, at least as I see it. The Warring Houses idea sounds ideal for role-playing games, or maybe even a video game. Predicted injustice there, didn't he? The overall continuity is hopefully enhanced without being damaged in any irreversible way, and I think we might get a damn good yarn out of it in the bargain. Anyway, I seem to have gone on far longer than I intended, and so have we. So I better wrap this up. I'll be looking forward with interest to hearing what any of you have to say about all this when you've had a chance to read it. If any sections are incomprehensible and need clarifying, then please give me a call.
What is your number, Alan? Gladly give you a call.
Yes. You should come on the show. I tell you what, I'm bloody glad this never got made.
Me too.
And that's not because of the merits of it as a story, because I think, yes, certain aspects of it wouldn't have dated well if it had been made, but I think a lot of the problems we had with this story would have been fleshed out if it had got to being a larger story. But as we discussed earlier, Watchmen, Killing Joke, that put a stamp on DC Comics and superhero comics as a whole, and it kind of set the tone, and sort of lesser writers ran with certain themes from it without the satirical aspects and without the tongue-in-cheekness and without the larger point that it's making. And we ended up with stuff like Stan Lee and his monster getting tortured, and Identity Crisis, and all kinds of, just less successful things. And if this had been made, think of the influence it would have had. Like, I honestly don't think Superman would be the same character he is now. I think this would have broke a lot of DC heroes, and not because of Alan Moore or because of the merits of this story, but because of what people would have taken the wrong lessons from this. Because it would have been successful, right?
It would have 100% been successful.
Yeah. And the wrong lessons would have been taken from this, and it would have been horrendous.
Can you imagine the movies being made, you know, newer fans getting into these characters, going into a bookstore and then seeing on display a hardbound Twilight of the Superheroes with art by like Dave Gibbons, buying it, thinking, oh, now I'm gonna get into these characters, and then reading that.
Yeah.
They're not coming back.
No.
That's the one thing they read.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I think I said this earlier on as well. You know, this is a pitch, and it, you know, the stuff it didn't directly influence, it predicted. So imagine the influence it would have had if it had actually been made.
Yes, it would have been. Yeah. It would have been off the scale, like the 1-2-3 punch of Watchmen, Killing Joke, and Twilight of the Superheroes would have changed at least DC Comics forever.
Yeah,
and not for the better.
Just to pick an example out of the hat, Nightwing. This story would have defined Nightwing.
Yes,
and he would have ended up being a ruthless, you know, twisted kind of Dick Grayson.
The funny thing is, Batman eventually got there.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, we talked about how Wonder Woman doesn't really get talked about in this proposal, and how a lot of people don't really get talked about in this proposal. You know who doesn't actually get talked about in this proposal at all? Is Batman.
Yeah. Well, again, he's this force of nature, isn't he?
Well, that's the thing.
He's Frank Miller's Batman.
Yeah, I will say that, to his credit, you don't need to talk about Batman. He will write himself once you start it.
Yeah.
He'll get there. They'll figure it out. And I don't think anyone's worried about how Batman is going to be treated in something like this. Well, Paul, that took us like 8 hours.
Really?
Yeah, we were like 3 hours the other day, and then we were like 4 hours, so maybe around 7 hours.
Crikey.
We'll release this in 2 parts.
Well, I enjoyed it. I don't care if anyone else did.
Hopefully, I enjoyed it a lot. I think there's a lot to talk about. I hope that people also enjoyed us talking about this stuff. I know Twilight has probably been talked about to death, but not by us. Do we have anything else we want to say?
No, I think let us know what you think of Twilight in the comments. Let us know what you think of Alan Moore in the comments. If you disagree with anything we've said, or if you agree with anything we've said, let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. And let us know if you made it to the end of this discussion, and we'll give you some sort of award.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.